Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, shout out to Jack. I see that Jack's actually come full circle, and he's actually back where I was in like 2014. He's just doing webcam videos into like a very basic overlay, and they're getting about 20 to 30k per view. You're just me from 2015 now, Jack. Is that your whole thing? Because I got you fired from Team Liquid, you're just going to be like, I'm going to take this whole man's career. Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight, a show brought to you by Esports Bet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix. And obviously there's a whole smorgasbord of things we will say during the episode, but we'll start out by just saying the usual, which is if you've never deposited on Esports Bet, you can get right now a 50% deposit bonus up to $200. And if you do in fact deposit, then you'll also get a bonus of DJT as well, which you can use separately for the World's Prediction Series 2 competition, which no doubt you'll hear about some point during this episode. So start the episode.
Well, we also got a bunch of crypto USDT to wager on matches, which is going to come out.
Oh, that's true.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to start actually playing with real money, courtesy.
I will say, me and Monty have been getting bodied these first 2 weeks, but it's all right. We're going to turn it around.
Look, all I'm going to say is XL has been very disappointing this week.
All you need to know is this, Monty. We won't spend the first 10 minutes of this, because that's basically going to be the first 5 minutes of the next competitive edge lol, where basically I bemoan with Monty the fact that he went 0-4. Because I was even watching it like from afar, just seeing,
hey, we're not, Thorin, we're not done yet. CLG did win at 3-1 odds yesterday, yes. So we did recover some of it. But yeah, let's just say it hasn't.
And we have EGTL tonight.
And we have EGTL. And we have Immortals Golden Guardians. So we're okay. Yeah. We're okay.
Right. Well, we're going to turn the corner. We're going to reverse sweep this.
We're going to turn around.
By the way, one thing I want to start out with, because obviously I like to start at the beginning. If people don't know, I basically use the beginning of Summoning Insight a bit like we did with Buying Numbers, where we called it petty grievances, where we just, whatever rant you're thinking about, you just talk about. But I actually had a topic that's an appropriate one. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics on this one, Monty, because one thing I learned over the years is actually something in the last few years I've probably done a bad job with, to be fair. I've always thought the ultimate way you treat people who are shitters, who've never done anything to deserve your attention, never done anything to deserve to be part of the conversation, is you don't give them attention. You don't say their name. You don't mention them. There's a guy in CSGO, if people don't know, has probably tweeted about me 300 times over like a 10 years span. I've never even said his name, I don't think, on a fucking show. I'm fucking amazing at it. So anyway, we're not going to mention the specific person, but recently there was a little bit of a scandal, obviously, over the weekend. In fact, if you even watch the LEC, you'll know this, with a social media manager saying something silly, right? Which is, I was obviously gotten the org into trouble because now it's does the org fire the person? You get to that drama. But what I wanted to go into with you is this, because I've never heard anyone talk about this topic, Monty. If I had to say it as a general, like very quick, like, you know, say it was like Family Feud. Everyone knows that show. In England, it's actually called Family Fortune. But that show where you go in and you go on, and what did the survey say is, you know, the number one food for breakfast, that's a fruit. You're like, banana, Bill, or whatever. And he goes like, it was not banana, it was strawberry. Like, you know, when they do that whole game show. If we did that right now, and I had to say reasons why people would want to leave esports, one of the number one reasons, I'm not joking, fans, is how social media has become. It's essentially gotten so that if you're an OG and a vet, like most of us, that means you're going to be like late 20s, if not in your 30s. People who are 30 years old don't want to deal with 12-year-olds. They don't want to essentially have to have a conversation that's like talking to a literal 14-year-old kid right out of school. That's not, the age gap and the culture clash is crazy. So the problem I have is this. I don't mind that being in esports. Like, for example, for games like Fortnite, Minecraft, it makes total sense that you'd have it in those games. But what I hate is this, Monty, because in the modern day, it's all about getting this social media attention and clout and getting as much interest on your org. And in fact, in the modern day, so I always think it's hilarious that people are like, who cares if you have 200,000 followers? They all hate you. You moron. All they care about is the raw hits and impressions, you idiot. That's why all these social media managers are just literally the dumb fuck who posts the low quality meme. They just hire that guy because he already knows the low quality memes, and then they post the memes. Because I was going to get into this aspect, right? Not only do I hate the whole tack that they take, because like I say, it's just the most lowbrow humor ever, but I actually think the other thing that pisses me off is this, Monty. You do know, right? I would love, think about my persona. I would love it if League of Legends was like WWE and all the characters interacted and made amazing storylines. So if people don't know this, I would think it would be sick if like my account, which famously banters me, imagine if I could have like fun back and forth with like the Fnatic account and then like the Excel account and then the TSM account. It'd be hilarious for everyone. It'd be like UFC or something, wouldn't it? But you know why I don't do that? Because this is why the 2 points tied together, Monty, in quite a sort of underwhelming, mildly annoying way, which is because they only ever hire nobody shitters to run these accounts. they can never resist the temptation to abuse their power, Monty. They can't just keep it fun and lighthearted. What they do is they go like this. In the back of their mind, they go, yeah, but the thing is, I don't like MonteCristo. So when I banter him, I won't just banter. I'll make some like mean comment about renegades or something. And what they do is they hide behind a giant account, which isn't them. They're pretending they are Fnatic. They'll diss you from behind the wall of a Fnatic when no one knows who they are, usually. Although I will say, the really shit ones, like the story, go out their way to let you know, I run that account, like, which defeats the whole purpose. So anyway, the point is, like, in that scenario, like, that isn't cool. They just take pot shots from behind someone else's wall, basically, when there's no consequences to them. That actually ruins that whole vibe to me, mate. That's why I don't do it, if you notice. I don't tend to actually. In fact, if anything, I'm only now going to dunk on those accounts. I'm never going to interact and make it fun, because it's just a losing game. It's just a lose-lose scenario. And like, what do I get out of it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I thought that
this is a trend I've noticed. If you notice, the whole industry seems to have gone this way.
Yeah, I think it's just in general, like, when I look at Twitter in particular, it was a lot more fun, like 2015, when people just understood that it was purely for
no beef back then, was it? It was just
and banter,
yeah, exactly.
and like nobody actually took anything on Twitter seriously at the time.
Like, no one was blocking anyone back then for that. It's not a joke. None of us ever blocked each other. No one did. Wasn't even a thing back then.
I mean, I had to block people who were like giving me death threats and shit like that. There were people on the block list for sure, but I just think that at the time, a lot more people just thought it was banter, or that nothing should be taken seriously, and that Twitter was basically just for posting memes, banter, and posting content.
Of course, yeah.
And that was about it. And I guess people like. It feels like people, where you used to get the benefit of the doubt from Twitter, now what happens is people just assume the worst possible interpretation of what you're saying, which I guess it's tiresome. And I guess this is part of a lot of like teenagers who have very literal thinking skills being on here and just
there is no metaphor anymore, is there? That just doesn't exist in esports anymore.
So, I don't know. I that's why I've dialed way back on Twitter, generally speaking, because I just don't.
By the way,
very amusing.
You actually make a greater point about society that's nothing to do with esports. I actually think in general, if I had to describe, Monty, the number one problem most people seem to have socially now, it's that there is no such thing as metaphor. Everyone is literal minded. As in, you'll have seen this yourself, Monty. In the modern day, if I make a comment now, like say I was having a rant about someone in the industry, I don't like Carback or whatever, and at the end I was like, and you know what, motherfucker, you'll get it when I see you. What I would mean by that, as anyone would know, is just like, obviously I'll wreck you if I say it, but I would have to then say it in the modern day, I would have to go in a video game, of course, I'm not threatening violence, even though it's totally obvious to anyone who knows the clockers, like I'm not doing that. But as you say, in the modern day, it's not like benefit of the doubt. Well, we haven't got any inclination to know he'd be. It's the opposite. It's like if there's any way you can read into that the person's like violent or you just assume that by default, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, from what I've seen of this particular incident, I know we're not talking about the specific incident with the XL guy, because that seems like pretty cut and dried. Like,
it's just nonsense, that one. Yeah, exactly.
What the fuck is this guy doing?
Exactly,
like, I mean, if you guys are unaware, he was basically privately posting some really like heinously kind of offensive shit.
He was just connecting super edgy stuff that you wouldn't be able to say as a public figure. Here's what he did the mistake of, Monty. Here's another mini rant we can do. This will only take 1 minute though. Discords that anyone can join are the public. That essentially, when you put something in a Discord and you're all thinking like, no, well, I was just talking about friends on Discord. No, you weren't. When you put it on that Discord and you work as a public figure, that's like buying a billboard in fucking Times Square. Like, you can't then later be like, what? But I was just saying that with mates. Like, you weren't in that scenario, unfortunately, in esports. If you notice, there's another thing that's ruined esports, mate. When these Discords came around, every fucking idiot starts treating it like it's a private gathering. Like, even Lena's done it about half a dozen times. Like, they just go there and they act like, because they really think like only, this is almost like where they're on the old Twitter thinking, they think only their fans are going to access it somehow. It's like everyone will access it if it's edgy enough. It's controversial. Well, it'll get out there to everywhere. And by the way, there's always lunatic screenshot and everything and all those Discord. Don't worry about that as well. Don't worry about that. There's always nutters.
Yeah. I think this particular instance from the stuff that I saw Rich's tweet with some screenshots. I mean, that was like some really fucked up shit. So,
by the way, the reason why it's even been made, like, obviously it was a drama and legal, but the only reason me and Rich have commented on it basically is because that person, as you can imagine, like I said, was just super shitty to us every fucking time, about 50 times in a row. So you know what? If someone's super shitty to you over basically nothing, and then it turns out they're like low-key on the side, like, you know that Austrian painter from the 20th century. Where are you going with this, mate? Where are you going with it? You know, it's just hoisted by their own petard, isn't it, Monty? That's why we have that saying back in English.
Yeah. So I understand your point, which is like, this guy was had some very disturbing opinions, let's put it that way, and maybe didn't want to reveal them on a Discord, but also was hiding behind the brand account to like kind of be shitty to people. And I mean, I guess I do think that's
it's even better than that. I'll give you another example of it, because here's another classic one, and you're going to love this, Monty, because you, like me, have been directly impacted by this. Do you know the other move that they do before they were able to access the TSM account? Because if people don't know, by the way, fans, 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't people doing these memes from massive accounts. Usually accounts were professional. I'll tell you the old place, these little dickheads, these literal dickheads used to go, Monty, and I'm going to reveal it all right now. They used to go and they would make a shit little parody account, and they're so unoriginal that because the first one was called Meteos's ego, they're all people's ego. So there was Thorin's ego, and then there was Monty's ego, and then there's Bad Jacob Wolf, and then so spoiler, I'll give you a spoiler right now, fans. All the people who ran those accounts are the shitters I'm talking about. Wasn't like I think the Bad Jacob Wolf was that dickhead Darius Ax Machina from Schalke. I think the fucking MonteCristo's ego was that Tiberius Audley cunt who never stopped tweeting at us a million times. I think the fucking, what's the other ones? I think the Meteos ego was maybe someone else in the NA scene at the time. I forget who that one was exactly. I think that one was actually the vaguely funny one, which is why I probably can't remember who it was.
I think basically funny, but whatever.
Most of yours were too wax. The problem with those, Monty, was the people who wrote them never understood satire. They never had any nuance. It would always just be like MonteCristo saying like, "Lol, I love rotations and Koreans." It's like, what's the skill in writing that tweet, man? That's just that's a pantomime version of MonteCristo. That's just garbage. You know what I mean? So I always thought those were whack, but this is the stories connect, Monty, because are you ready for the comeuppance of all comeuppances? In the modern day, I'll tell you a new type of parody account people love to run, a novelty account. It's when you run those accounts, there's one in CS and there's one in League of Legends. You know what they're called? Like moments before unfortunate moment. So you'll show like, say like a tweet of me like that. Well, I didn't do anything before Katowice, but say I'd done a tweet before Katowice about Poland. You'd do that and then you'd have next to it, the next screenshot.
Right,
it's like Twitter format, the next screenshot would be like, Thorin removed from Katowice or whatever. You have those accounts, right? You won't believe this, Monty. This is so perfect. One of the main ones of those accounts that intentionally posts meme-related material without context is called No Context LOL. Are you ready for the punchline? This cunt was one of the guys running it. And so because he ran it, Monty, but people don't know that, they were all submitting this incident because it's obviously grist for exactly that type of mill. This is exactly the content they would post and mock and get famous off. But because the main guy was one of the people and then his co-founder doesn't want to be associated, they are actively, publicly refusing to post about this incident. So basically, everything else in the scene's funny and dunk on it, but when it's your own shit, magically doesn't get dunked on, does it? And the best part of all, by the way, is this is where every time I just checkmate these motherfuckers. The idiot guy who was the other person who runs that account, Monty, tried to tell me like, raging at me won't make you relevant again. It's like, bro, I've been featured on your account about 5 times. By your own logic, your account isn't relevant if that's true. Think about it, you dumb fuck. Like, the real joke is this: your guy isn't relevant enough. He's only relevant because of this drama. So there's another one I'm sick and tired of, is those shit accounts. Because again, those could be really funny. Like, I love satire shit like the fucking Babylon Bee or whatever. If you do it if you have a little bit of skill, it can actually be really funny. But these are just lowbrow. These are just rubbish guys. Like essentially, like I'd give you like a fucking D for effort. There you go. You tried something, you did something, but you didn't do it well.
I think the issue is that.
Oh, by the way, shout out to the BDS account though for absolutely
that was really funny.
That was funny. Because there's the other thing. By the way, there's the one last thing I'll say, which is this. Look, I actually do understand this is difficult, right? If you're Excel, you still have to operate. You still have to try and do your normal business. But I'll tell you one thing. Maybe for that one weekend, I might have just said to the account, don't make memes mocking the other teams. Still do all the rest, do everything else, but maybe don't imply the other team are trash when we have got an Austrian painter enthusiast on our side. And also, then when you lose the fucking game and it is BDS, like that was almost like the universe just like correcting a wrong or something.
That was I thought that was some actually like funny banter from BDS. I did have a laugh at that. Yeah, I think a lot of the issue is honestly that these like social media jobs are often delegated to like they're given to the people who are most in touch with social media, which is
that's what I mean.
translation for the youngest people and most junior people. And so what happens is that management usually isn't paying attention to what these people are saying because they themselves are out of touch with social media and don't know what's going to be successful or what's going to be funny or what's appropriate or not. And so they kind of just run riot with the brand's accounts. And I think that's the primary issue here, is that they actually have too much discretion. And like you're saying, it's not, they are pushing their own agendas, and it's not that they're trying just to have fun with the accounts or have universal banter or be clever or witty. It's that they have a very specific set of goals in mind when it comes to how they operate within this scene, and it doesn't necessarily align with the brand details. Now, I will also say that part of this is definitely that branding is extremely weak in esports as a whole. And so a lot of these brands just don't have identities, so they just become the
G2
identity,
right?
yeah, like
Pretty much.
G2 is one of the better ones, right? And like, I think if you get control of the G2 esports account, you understand what the tone of that account should be. But I would say that most people in this space do not actually have an idea of what the
Actually, you know what?
Ideals
I don't
are.
think whoever does run the G2 account, I can't think of when they've ever slipped up, mate. Like, they might have made a joke that wasn't funny, but generally, actually, you're right. Whoever they hire is on point, mate. They do exactly what I want. Actually, they do sort of in a fun way interact with the community. Yeah, I think they do a great job.
But I think that's very clear because they have a clear brand identity. I think that part of the problem is that you are hiring young people who have never usually worked professional jobs before and haven't worked in marketing and haven't worked in branding. And then you bring them in and you don't even give them any kind of real brand identity to work with. So they just kind of have to make it up as they go along. So yeah, I mean, I do think it's annoying. It's not, I wouldn't say it's my biggest axe to grind in the universe, because I just don't go to Twitter anymore as a result of what you're saying, honestly, a lot of the time, because it's basically a broader trend where it hasn't been fun for me for the most part. And I'll banter a little bit only with people I know who understand its banter and I know can take it. And then otherwise I just kind of ignore it.
I actually do think there's one other reason. Because when I think about it, it can't all be negative. Like, I'll give one reason why, from our perspective, I also think it's way worse now. Because to be fair, one thing people can never understand if they weren't there, this is how you can tell who wasn't there, Monty, is the people who think that like esports was static and we were like always the people we are now, but like 10 years ago. I always have to tell people, if you ever go and look it up, you'll be amazed how like fast the Twitter growth was in League of Legends. Like, I always tell people this, when I was fired from On Games, I think I had like 30,000 followers or something. I think it was even mentioned in like an article, like he has 30,000 followers. I remember reading an article and being like, what the fuck, did I only have 30k then? That was only like 8 years ago. So what people don't know is there was like basically like a prime spot in the middle of league where all of our accounts went from like 20, 30 to like hundreds of thousands. Well, I will say, to be fair, if you only have 40k people, you think you've got a lot of followers, but you can sort of manage them, you can interact with them. It's way more sort of like you're on their level. I will say the problem with being the 200k people is you are automatically, so there's just too many people trying to contact you and do stupid shit. So it just, unfortunately, like the signal noise of idiots is what sort of drowns out. So it also does make you, I have to say, be fairly dismissive of the idea there's any, like, sort of any goal to be planned out of that shit, doesn't it? Just makes you think, I'll just turn off this fucking line.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there was pretty explosive growth at the time when Twitter was growing, I think the most, like the 2014, 2015 era. I mean, at 2013 Worlds, I think I got like 50K off of 1 month or something like that. It was really, really crazy. But yeah, I think it's just different these days in terms of, growth is obviously much slower for Twitter as a whole, and the platform seems to be, used differently. But I agree. I think stronger brand guidelines and maybe a stronger hand on some of the social media accounts would be welcome, because it is just causing a morass that lacks any kind of entertainment, in my opinion.
I'm also just so sick of people who are like, I'm your biggest fan. It's like, oh, okay, well, I've clicked the Twitter button. Now I hate you forever. Like, oh, I will pound the streets proselytizing against you. I am your demon apostate. Like, and then meanwhile, you like that tweet I did the other day. Like, then you look like 2 years earlier. You look at their Twitter timeline, and there's like tweets 2 years earlier, like, happy birthday. Good morning. Just want to say good morning. Like, then like 3 years later, I am the demon Asmodeus who will hurt you. I'm like, fuck. Just did 3 clicks on a fucking Twitter account. What the fuck?
Don't you have something better to do?
I know. Come on, man. Why are you haunting me? There's the other thing. It's never fucking Reginald they haunt. It's always has to be some cunt like me, doesn't it? It's never some evil person.
To be fair, you don't know that. You don't know
That's true, actually. I can't really know, to be fair, when Reginald does get his DM. That's true. Because you know the other thing, to be fair, as bad as my Twitter experience has been, Monty, I've always had one safeguard other people don't, which is I've never, ever in my entire account's history ever turned on public DMs. You can only DM me if I follow you. Now, I will say, I do think it's stupid.
Do public
DMs? Because unfortunately, people like Richard obviously need it for, like, you know, anonymous tips and stuff. But it just means that, like, if you can imagine the shit they'd say to you publicly, mate, you can only imagine the shit they'd say privately. So, like, I'm never going to have that shit open ever in my life.
I've never turned that on one time.
I know.
And then what I think is also funny about people in this industry is they have open DMs and then they're like, help, people are messaging me mean things. And then they post screenshots of like randoms in their DMs. I'm like, just fucking close your... You literally are just a caster. You have no reason to have DMs open. You're not an investigative reporter who needs anonymous tips. Just close your DMs. This is purely some weird ego trip for you, or you're like catfishing for girls who want you or some shit. Like, what are you doing? Close your DM. That's almost certainly the main reason you would have open DMs, I think.
And there's the other thing, by the way, I'll tell you right now, if you're hoping for that, like you're naively hoping on a wish and a dream that some girl's going to contact you, like, check out these pics. Like, spoiler, you also missed the party on that. Like 10 years ago, you might have got that. In the modern day, like Monty says, that's going to be a trap. Like, that's going to be someone trying to fuck with you. That's going to be a fake picture, or that's going to be like a picture. And then to tie it in the earlier story, you're going to go, nice. And then they're going to go, what the hell? I'm only 15. And you're going to be, what the fuck? Exactly. So just don't even open the DMs, guys. It's not going to be, what's the upside? What's the upside? There's already, the internet is full of anonymous people's tits. You don't even need that. It's full of it on the internet. Come on.
Also, this is going to sound hypocritical because I'm literally married to somebody in esports. But hey, guys, how about you try the ultimate challenge of dating somebody not in esports? I know it's hard because you might have to survive not on your professional reputation, but on the strengths of your personality and perhaps other interests outside of your job. To be fair, my wife is the only person I've ever dated in esports. Everyone else was outside of esports before this. So yeah, I would just try that, guys. Maybe that is the way forward to happiness. Take a break from esports in part of your life. It can be nice.
Plus, you did also marry one of like the most OG women in esports. It's not you just married some like fucking booth babe or something, is it? Like, I know. That's the other thing. So many people are just gambling with their careers, meddling it. I know.
All right, we should talk about this show's favorite topic, which is formats. I know. By the way, very excited.
Here's what needs to be said as a disclaimer at the beginning, because every single format discussion in the history of the world is ruined by one set of people. And you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about when I describe them. They're the people where even though what you're doing when you have a format discussion is you're talking both specifically but also abstractly about, like, what do you want in a tournament? What are you selecting for? What gives the best team the best chance? Should the team have the best chance if they're the best team, or should there be an element of luck? Right? When you do all that, what you're doing is having a very open-ended discussion about, like, hypothetical, and then what you get is a group of people ruin it by constantly going, see, you're saying they don't deserve it, so surely the team that wins deserves it, but if you lose in that format, then why don't you just win? If you were better, you'd have won. Well, the team that won, what don't they deserve? And they just keep using the word deserve to smash your head in with this, like, ridiculous concept. Well, the problem with that approach is essentially you can only go one approach. Either everyone deserves it, or we can have this discussion we're going to have, because obviously if you set the format as best of ones, then yes, whoever wins the most best of ones by default is the number one team. They deserve it. Now, the problem with that is we can all watch Mad Lions against Rogue the first time round. Did they really deserve that? I mean, sort of. They caught a throw, but, like, again, that's the point. So to me, I would just say it. I'm saying that at the beginning because every idiot's going to say it anyway. So let's get that out of the way. We're not going to talk about who deserves what. What we're going to talk about is the problems or pros and cons of the format and maybe what we would tweak. So the obvious problem right now is basically something, and by the way, as usual in esports, chef's kiss, I love you esports, you're so fucking shit, because everyone in esports, including the professional players who have millions of potential dollars of prize wings on the line, they never look at the fucking format and the rules until it's at the very end when it could fuck them. So what they do is they don't find out tiebreaker rules until they're in a tiebreaker. They don't find out, like, what happens with this, with this, that. They just always wait, right? So in CS, they never find out what the damage thing is. Do you stop the game now? Do you pause it? Do you restart? They never find out. So what no one's found out until right now, Monty, when, spoiler, the entire LEC except BDS is, like, locked into, like, a nightmare death spiral battle royale for the 6 spots. We've now discovered that the circuit point thing basically invalidates the LEC playoffs, if people don't know. Now, I will say it's not as simple as that. The reason the circuit points is fucking us is because we've got an entirely different top three, haven't we? We went from G2, Rogue, and Fnatic to like maybe Rogue, XL, Mad Lions, and then now maybe even Vital. So because we've got a totally different top three, top four almost. The problem is the original top three hold on to those championship points from finishing top three in the spring. And it means now, basically, as we'll get into, there's all these scenarios which mean that even though you'll get to enjoy the matches in the playoffs, they don't mean anything. As in, teams like G2 and Rogue and Fnatic, basically, if they finish like top two, top three, they just automatically qualify for Worlds. They don't need to do anything else. In fact, some of them, Monty, there's even scenarios where if you're like Fnatic saying you got like the last playoff spot, say like G2 and Rogue just like play each other in the right match, they can like qualify you by one of them winning or lose. You know what I mean? Like essentially it's that scenario where you can qualify for Worlds, not based on anything you did this summer or based on like one match. Yeah. So it's just going to unfortunately make what would have been like, imagine instead if I could reset everyone's memory and there was no circuit points, and you're looking at these matches now in LEC, which are incredibly like they're constantly back and forth, and no one even knows yet what the sixth playoff teams are going to be. Then imagine you go into that playoffs and you thought like past years, dude, it's whoever finishes top four. Even having that fourth spot was going to make it more hype, right? Because now that fourth place match gets it. But the problem is actually a lot of that, essentially once you shade in the championship points, is not going to, it's going to like halve how sexy a lot of these matches are, unfortunately.
Yeah, and to describe what's going on for you guys who may be unaware, because this has shifted basically recently. So why this is a big deal is because the LEC was given a fourth seed at Worlds because of the Russian league, the LCL, not being able to participate this year due to the Russian and Ukrainian war.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this was not planned for by LEC when they were designing these playoffs. I don't think that they thought they were going to have a fourth spot, which is why this problem was created. I don't know if you can, like, clearly they couldn't anticipate this geopolitical situation coming in, and they wouldn't have thought they could get 4 seeds. But what this has done, guys...
Oh, I forgot. The one other thing to mention, Monty, is it's also because, if you remember... Oh, this is the thing to say. The problem is this. There's two different incentives here. Are you trying to find the best team in LEC, or are you trying to qualify for Worlds? The problem they have, Monty, is the second is taken over the first. Because remember, one thing they changed that I actually was in favour of, by the way, is to make the regular split mean something. They made it so if you're in the upper bracket, you don't just drop down. You drop down based on seeding. So that was also the problem I forgot to mention. If you're someone like a Rogue and you're in the upper bracket, even if you lose, you go into the fourth place match, aren't you?
Yes.
You just wait and so you automatically qualify, basically, almost. You know.
So that's what's going on, is that the top 6 teams make Worlds or make playoffs, and of those 6 teams that make playoffs in the summer, they are seeded according to their championship points. And that means that they received points for being in the spring playoffs. So if you were top 6 in spring, you got some points, and you get anywhere from 10 to 90. 90 is first place. So G2 currently has 90, Rogue has 70, Fnatic has 50, etc. And so what happens is these teams, should they make playoffs again, will then be seeded according to their spring playoffs, right? So why this is an issue is obviously some of these teams are going to be making these playoffs.
I mean, G2 could basically be the number 2 seed, probably, even if they were in 6th place at this point. That's how ridiculous it is. Because obviously Mad Lions didn't make the playoffs, if you forget. You know?
Yeah.
In spring, that is.
Yeah. So basically, and also they get points based on their finish in the regular season. So it's the finish in the playoffs of spring combined with, if you're in first place at the end of the regular season, you get 120 points. You get 90 points, which is the same amount of points for second place that you would have gotten for finishing first place. So first off, it's a little weird, Thorin. I would not design a format like this for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is, so the first round of points is coming off of performance in a best of 5. And the second round of points is coming off of a performance in a double round robin best of 1. So right now you're giving points, the same points, for 2 different skills, which is one of them is strength against the field and one of them is strength against specific opponents in a bracket. So like that makes no sense just objectively, because you're testing for 2 different things and then you're applying points for playoff seeding for the bracket based on that, which is really weird. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't actually have the spring performance mattering that much because I just don't think it's applicable. What's happening here is Riot still has a bad system where they want to have spring and summer splits, and they want spring to matter so fucking desperately that they're willing to shoehorn absolutely anything into it to justify the existence of this garbage ass spring split that is irrelevant to the
You
international.
know what always tilted me about this, Monty, is this is another one of our classic moments with Crossroads, where to everyone else they're like, it's always been that way in League of Legends, Monty. No other way you can do it. But I'm not from League of Legends, so I've seen it can be done a million ways. The problem is it's so obvious how you fix this. Here's how you fix spring so that it matters. Spoiler, you've ruined it already, so we can't. If you just didn't make it so that in League of Legends you pay Bjergsen the GDP of a small fucking island country, then if it wasn't just money, you'd make money the incentive. You just make like $1 million for first place in spring. Who the fuck wouldn't compete for that? Spoiler, that's why people compete in other games like CSGO. You try to win the prize money. That's the reason you go to the tournament. Yeah, sure, it's cool to win IEM Cologne. Tell you what, Monty, if it was 10k for first place, it would be way less cool. So people do, they compete for the prize money. If you actually had a proper incentive for spring, like why doesn't spring just go? I've always said this. I personally think regular season should be like a league and you get a championship for being first. Like I don't know why Rogue wouldn't have any celebration that they've won all those fucking round robins. I think you should get good prize money. Like it can't just be for Worlds. Worlds can't be the only like sort of fucking lure that we're all going for. There's got to be other things we're competing for, surely.
Well,
so
that's the way Riot
ways to make it cool,
I mean, that's the way Riot set it up, though. So effectively, guys, to bring this all to a head, what happens is that if you are the first place team, you are guaranteed to go to Worlds no matter what, because there are now 4 seeds, and because of the way that they made the bracket. If you lose in the first round, the highest seed, which could be the first seed, right? It may not be the first seed, but it could be the first seed, automatically makes top 4. That team is guaranteed a world slot. It's just a matter of which seed they are. Do they have to play in the play-ins, et cetera, et cetera? So it's not like they get straight into the group stage. They do have to play in the play-ins if the first seed kind of bottoms out in 3rd or 4th place. But it is weird that you can automatically qualify for Worlds based on this, especially, and I will say this, especially if it ends up being G2, who has had a bit of a shaky season, who is now tied with 3 other teams. There are 4 teams right now at 9 and 6 in the league. And because there have been so many upsets, and here's the other factor that people haven't mentioned that I've seen. We're going into a super week, guys. Let's be very clear. Super weeks fucking suck for competitive integrity.
Guaranteed you're going to get upset. Just guaranteed in it. Yeah.
Suck. There is no way that you can basically prepare for 3 different teams in 3 different days effectively. LCS and LEC are the only regions that do this. Everyone else has a best, LPL and LCK have a best of 3 that they have days to prepare for. Then they have a couple days off. Then they have their next best of 3, typically speaking. The fact that they make the teams run this gauntlet. And the worst part is they make them do it in the last weekend when it's the race for playoffs. It basically ensures instability heading into the playoffs and potentially worse teams making it there. If anything, you should do this at the start of every round robin. You should do it at the start of the season. And then you should do it for the start of, right? Yeah, they do it on the first week, but they should also do it halfway through.
And it's the next round robin.
At the start of the next round robin. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Agreed.
Alternatively, just don't fucking do it. That would be cool. I wish they wouldn't just fucking do it.
What you're talking about, by the way, if you have to have super weeks, the reason why it would make more sense where you're doing it is because then that would also be like part of your quest. So it's like, right, if we did bad in the first one, we have to get like the boost. Like that's like the booster pad is week 1 of the thing. Whereas as you're saying, at the end, it's just more like everyone just throw everything at the wall. Fucking, it's last helicopter out of Vietnam for the playoffs. Like it's ridiculous, isn't it? I know. And there's just one shit team just hanging on the edge of the helicopter, which in this case is going to be like, dude, I don't know if we're going to talk about any teams, but the one that's blowing my mind, like, because everyone's going on about Vitality. Because they haven't noticed. Dude, Misfits won't stop winning. Misfits have Vitality. You're going to ruin this whole playoff for everyone. What are they doing?
I mean, the problem with this too is that, here's what happens. It's like there's some sort of gladiatorial super weak melee going on in the Roman Colosseum, right? And the guy who's going to like be one of the survivors is currently just hiding under some sort of upturned chariot while everyone else is just duking it out, going full tilt at each other. And he's just going to hide there and then just pop out and stab some dude in the back and be like, yeah, I lived. It's not a good scenario. It's pure chaos in this situation, and especially because the LEC has already had all of these upsets that have gone on. It's just going to sow more chaos into the results and probably send one or two teams that are not worthy over to Worlds. I will say, at least Mad Lions is locked for playoffs. That is, a burden off of my soul, because they can't actually be passed by the rest of the teams in the standings right now, because they are 2-0 versus, I think, all of the teams.
No, Mad Lions got lost twice to Rogue, so the Rogue's the only team that can overtake.
Oh yeah. But Rogue. So of the 7 and 8 teams, I mean, so
Right,
Astralis,
sorry,
XL, and Fnatic. So if all of those teams win, there is still, I believe, Mad Lions would win based off of tiebreakers. Is the way that it actually works.
Yeah, based on the rest of the record. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are actually guaranteed at least a spot in playoffs. But what that seed is going to be, considering they're only one game ahead of the rest of the pack, and they have to play G2, Astralis, and BDS. Okay, so they're probably going to be first place, based on strength of schedule. So yeah, I do think it's problematic. Also, to pile on to this format stuff, we also have the very unsurprising revelation. I saw this thread on Reddit, and people are like, well, based on the scheduling, double elimination isn't happening at Worlds. Yeah, no shit, guys. We knew that when they announced the tour. Because again, and we keep saying this, why does Riot prioritize moving from city to city to please maybe 10, 15,000 live fans at the cost of the experience of the millions of people who watch Worlds online? It is such a stupid trade-off that you have to move cities in order for this to happen. Now, in my experience, fans are more than happy to travel to countries. There were thousands of fans that came to Korea for Worlds when I was casting it in 2014. Oh. And so they'll come to a city within that same country. If you host it in that city, they will fill those stadiums up. But it allows you to have a venue for a longer period of time without the enormous expense and logistical nightmare of moving all the production crew, everybody from Riot, all of the teams, all of the players around, all of the setups that you have to have for practice. And all of that time could be used to create more content. All that expense could be used to pay for the double elimination tournament. It would be much cheaper just to have it in one place and not move it, and take that same amount of money that you saved from not moving trucks and trucks of broadcast and stage equipment from city to city, paying new people to set it up in that city, everything like that. Just don't do that. Add double elimination. It's not that fucking hard. And we get another year of this tournament. And for some reason, they had ample opportunity over the last few years to change this. And they could have done it last year. Remember when they have been stuck in like Iceland? There was no reason you couldn't have run a double elimination tournament. Nobody could leave. They were in a COVID bubble. You could have just done more games in that one location and used it as a trial to prove that double elim works. And not only that, but Riot knows double elim works. They use double elim in their regional playoffs right now.
In all their playoffs. Yeah, exactly. I know.
Except for LCK, which is, LCK playoff format does suck, but it sucks a lot. But they also use it in Valorant now. And it's the same people. It is the same people, guys. It's the same people who designed the Worlds format who are now designing the Valorant format. And they have capitulated. They have de facto admitted they were wrong, and that they are now doing this in Valorant and trying to repair that mistake. But they will not do it in League of Legends.
That's what's genius,
reasons that are just beyond.
Think about it. This is Riot in a nutshell. They will ostensibly, through their other actions, show that they now understand they were wrong. But they won't, fix the biggest tournament in the entirety of
exactly,
esports.
Right?
Because I've always said this, right? If people don't know, I actually think on some level, look, Riot can run their own tournament. I'm talking about historical context here. I think it's actually shameful that League of Legends will never actually get the true rep of being the biggest event in esports. TI is always considered the biggest event. It's the event in esports, by the way, even above CSGO Major. That should be the World Championship. By the way, you are aware the World Circuit's like way bigger than League fucking Legends. You could bury these guys, but all because, here's the dumbest thing of all, Monty. Their whole vision over all the years, one of the reasons they wouldn't do it is because we don't want to copy Dota. That's why you're shit. First of all, you're League of Legends, for fuck's sake, copying Dota. What, you want to break the habit of a lifetime, homie? And then secondly, if you do the same as them, you now compete with them. So if you're better than them, you actually beat them. They would look like they were copying you almost. Like you would just be the better tournament. Because, yeah, if you look, everything else in League of Legends and in Valorant, as you say, if people don't know, the VCT tournament's not only a double elim, it's a very loved aspect of it. People go on like at TI about the fucking low bracket runs and how amazing they all are. The team that just won, if you don't know, in VCT and Valorant, FPX, came from the entire lower bracket. They had to run the whole thing. Well, the point is, in a Worlds tournament, it's like, sorry, you're out, see you, fucker. You'd be like boasted in round one, wouldn't you? There'd be no championship for you. So, yeah, to me, the idea they still haven't done it's mental. And then, spoiler, the idea people on Reddit are talking like it's some like murder mystery. Like, I wonder what this means. Riot would have like slapped their dick in your face. The joke is this, boys. The day they actually make Worlds double elim, they'll pretend they invented double elim. That's the way it'll be framed. Like, they'll go out their way to tell you they're going to do it. They're not going to pretend like you're not going to find out like, oh, there's a low bracket game at this Worlds. Like, it's not just going to get Worlds, are we?
Here's an analogy. It's just PR guys that they would do this. So us poor native esports people, like the Native Americans, we're just sitting around minding our own fucking business on our esports continent. Then Riot rocks up like Christopher Columbus and just pretends that they discovered it and then tells us how it's going to be and then tries to colonize our fucking continent. And this is how it has been. And guess what? Guess what the narrative is? Columbus discovered America, guys. That's the narrative that happened, just like Riot invented esports. And Riot is going to tell you when they invent double elimination, even though us esports natives have known about it the whole fucking time.
I always thought the wildest part, Monty, was that period of time when America was just like the East Coast, but then in came Riot Makers. I mean, James Madison, and then he just took over the entire open circuit and just made it all Riot. So, see what I did there?
So there's a hell of an analogy there
as well. There's a lot of treaties were broken in esports. I'll tell you that one. Hit me up on that one, Carmack. We can fucking agree on that one, right?
That's right. They tried to trade me beads for casting their world championship. It's actually too good of an analogy.
The joke is, mate, like even the way they got renegades from you almost reminds me of when, like, here's the problem. This storyline doesn't exist in movies anymore. It was always in 80s and 90s movies. The plot goes like this, Monty. This evil company's buying up all the properties to do any development, but this one old grandma won't give out the house. And they keep like, okay, that's like what you were renegades were like. They have to it was ridiculous. For some reason, that trend in movies used to be such a fucking mainstay theme, didn't it? It's just not in movies anymore, that one. Why is that one gone? I guess it's just not the age of the real estate developer or whatever anymore, is it? It's not the 80s. It's no longer the 80s. So I actually do think, though, I mean, I've obviously bemoaned it competitively a bunch of times because let's be real, it's the first thing I think at the end of every Worlds, Monty. I always just look at the bracket and I go, I never got to see this matchup. I was waiting for that one. I think this team would have been. So everyone does it anyway. But I have to say, I'm just going to say it right now, Monty. Even though they've done it in every other tournament, I don't think they'll ever do it in Worlds. That's genuinely my vibe. I don't think they'll ever do it, mate.
I mean, it would require them admitting that they're wrong.
Do it. I know.
I don't know. I'm hoping. Look, maybe I'm just delusional, but I am really hoping that they do. I think that maybe after all of the look, there's no way they could easily turn this around because they had to rent when they rent these venues, they have to rent them very far in advance. So if they weren't going to make the decision this year, it would have been too late to do it, even with the cancellation of the Toronto stop, because they had to find another stadium for just those 2 days. They managed to find one in Atlanta, right? It's not necessarily feasible to keep it in New York and do the semifinals there and kind of extend things. And they already locked in the finals date, and who knows what the Chase Centers, which is where the Warriors play in San Francisco, their availability is. Also, stadiums are super expensive, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of reasons why probably it couldn't have been done this year, which is why I was harping on them not experimenting with double elimination when they were all in one place for Worlds for the entire month, right? That's when you do it, and then you set up for the future. They also may not have known because of who knew how long this COVID stuff was going to go on, who knew what the state in various countries in terms of eligibility to enter from people all over the world could have been due to governmental restrictions. But if it's not here next year, I'm just convinced they're not going to do it, because at this point they can schedule far enough in advance for it that if it doesn't appear next year, I think that's it. I think that is the graveyard of double elimination at Worlds and League of Legends, because they need to make this tournament fix happen now. Or what my question would be, if it's not going to happen next year, what would actually
why would it ever happen?
Why would it ever happen, right? I think it's clear that people want this. people have always wanted it, but for some reason they're maybe deciding to listen right now.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you, I'll spitball away. I think it could happen because my problem, essentially, money, as you say, is I just think ultimately they do view this as the Rubicon. If they cross this line, it does. I will say as well, they're right. It does open up the question the second you cross that line. Why weren't you just doing that the last 10 years? Like it will make you look a bit silly, I have to say, especially if everyone loves it. So here's the way I'm trying to game plan a way it could happen. Here's the way it could happen, Monty. You'd have to have a total changing of the guard, in my opinion. If like a new set of people took over Riot, like HQ Esports Global Division, and they wanted to like a way to make their stamp is we're going to come in with a new regime. Maybe they do that as like a way to distinguish themselves. I could see that maybe being the angle. Aside from that, I don't think it's going to happen though. I don't think. You know, one thing that's mad, whenever people talk about the scenario of like people getting to see the games and can they see all the matches, it reminds me of that thing where people want sports to be like that classic experience of, you know, you go with your dad to the baseball game and all that. But here's the problem, right? Because have you ever seen that classic meme, Monty? It's a meme that people always use when they're trying to make that point about like equity and privilege. You know, the one where it's a bunch of kids looking over a wall at a baseball game. Have you ever seen this famous meme? And it's three kids, Monty, and they're different heights. Like one's just tall enough to see over, so he's just watching. One's like getting lifted up or something. And then the third guy's like on a box, but he can't see over, and they're like, see, that's why we need equity, because that small guy didn't have the same opportunities. But I've always thought the most hilarious thing about that meme, if no one's ever seen it, is they're all illegally watching the game. They're all looking over the fence. Like, none of them should be able to watch that game, logically. That's a shit meme. Just get a new meme on that one. That doesn't even make any sense. Surely the main kid should run a box. He's not just looking over the wall himself. How does that make any sense? And Gladys exists. Does that too?
All right. So I just had to get that out of my way because like Reddit was just so stupid, being like, finally we have verification. It's like it was verified when they announced the 4 stops that it was never going to. That it was never.
By the
going to
way,
be that way.
the worst thing about League is eventually you all agree with me. Like you all now know that guess what? TSM are full of shit and all idiot. It just takes you too long. It takes so many years. So the reason I also hate the way everyone's like born again for fucking double a limb, Monty, is I've said this since the first year I came in League of Legends in like 2013. And if people don't know, for the first 5 or 6 years, the fans themselves used to battle us and say all this shit like, who says that I need to be good? Or the worst one ever. You know, the worst one ever is when they would just always be like, but without a proper bracket reset. Oh god, that one used to hurt me inside.
No. We're not going. Please. We fought that battle too many times.
No, that's what I mean. Though they keep doing it again. They keep bringing that same fight back. In it, I know. There is no bracket reset. The bracket reset where it died.
We're not explaining that one again. If you believe that, you are an idiot. That is the end of story.
You're not going to make it. It's too late.
You don't understand the game of League of Legends. You don't understand how much it would cost to have a bracket, like the finances of esports, and like why it's not possible to rent a stadium for more days, why you can't do it on the same day for a lot of reasons, why it still is fair because teams that go through the lower bracket have to play way more games with the threat of elimination over their head. You are just an idiot. Like
the only real upside to the bracket reset is sort of like the OCD feeling of completeness of like, oh, that like cap's not quite on this felt pen. Like, oh, thanks. Like that's the only thing. It's not like, as you say, it's not even like the finals necessarily better. It might be worse. You're only doing it so you can go, you technically did all get 2 lives, though, and that's the end of the tournament. Like that's it. Great.
Yeah, like there isn't a punishment for playing 2 or 3 more best of 5s in a loser's bracket. Like that's not enough of a punishment. Anyway. I don't think, I mean, obviously we could talk about how the LCK's playoffs are still garbage. That is pretty problematic still.
The problem with the LCK playoffs is it reminds me a bit of what it's like for me in CSGO, where like, even though things are still bad, Monty, I just remember when they were worse, and I'm like, I don't trust this dev. Maybe we just don't say anything. We keep like this, guys. Because that's the problem with LCK. Look, it isn't great, like you say. If we were starting with this, I'd say it's a terrible format, Monty. The problem is, though, I know how dog shit the LCK format was for the last, like, 4 or 5 years. Before that, though, and it was fucking atrocious. So I do prefer this one over the old Gauntlet one, for sure.
Right. And also, for the purpose of world qualification for LCK, like, basically the summer winner is the number 1 seed. The number 2 seed, or no, is the championship points one over the course of the year. And then they also have a separate regional qualifier. So I think it's less egregious because... Yes. You get the playoffs, but then there are 4 teams beyond the 2 teams that are already qualified who get to battle for the last 2 slots.
By the way, that's the obvious thing. If they're going to keep the system they have in Europe, which, by the way, Monty, just within Europe only, if we ignore Worlds, I actually think it's a pretty good playoff system. I think it's got some good compromises. It's got an interesting approach. Obviously, it's different to the LCS one. The problem is this. If they're going to keep the same system where now the circuit points, if you add it in, sort of like fucks up the incentive, they should just make it so that like the circuit points part just goes into a fucking gauntlet after the winner and the... Like, I would just do it like top 2 make Worlds and then the rest from a gauntlet or something. Essentially bring back the old system, because that would take out the problem we talk about with 3rd and 4th, isn't it?
That is basically what it does, is that the winner of summer qualifies.
We should do it in LEC though, in my opinion. I think it would be a good approach.
Yeah, I think that this, people will say like LCK, so technically the playoffs are not double elimination, but effectively the Worlds, like basically what happens is the Worlds qualifier makes it so Worlds qualification in the LCK is de facto double elimination. Because if you're eliminated from the summer playoffs, and you still have enough championship points, you do get a second life in the qualification tournament.
By the way, sorry, go on.
No, and if you win, you were never, you basically, I guess the thing is like that winner may have been eliminated and then gotten through to from the lower bracket, but that can still happen. They can still qualify for Worlds.
Oh, right, I see what you mean.
It's kind of like double elimination, like split into 2 different events, weirdly. So it's just not for the summer playoffs. It's more like, if you think about the complete structure of playoffs plus the qualifier, it's like a double elim Worlds qualifier kind of.
I also thought, actually, if you go on this channel and watch the Best Damn League show from 2 weeks ago, the one we had Zabatine on, he actually made another point that I thought was a good one about having a gauntlet, by the way, Monty, which is this. If you make it so that there isn't a gauntlet, which is what we currently have in LEC, and essentially the bracket is the gauntlet, as in if you lose the 3rd place match, Monty, you are the 4th seed for Worlds. If you lose the 3rd place match, as it goes like that, right? So basically, if you have that system, Zabatine's point was a good one, which is that means that someone can qualify for Worlds off a loss, and it's like, but whatever, we're at Worlds. He said instead, if you do a gauntlet, even the last place team is like, yeah, we qualify for Worlds because you've like won a bracket, you've like won a match to go. So it almost gives like an extra like vibe. So I even think he's got a point there. It sort of makes the story a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, and I was also I was listening to this is going on to LCS playoffs now, but I was listening to the cast yesterday, I think, and I think Jat made
yourself. Keep going.
Jat made a good point, which is that instead of having the 7th and 8th place team just in the losers bracket of LCS, what they should do is take all of the like teams 5 through 8 and then run a play-in event where the top 2 teams like qualify. So you have 6 teams in actual playoffs, right? The top 2 teams skip, have a bye week, and then teams 3 through 6 play. So that way it still gives teams an opportunity, if you're there in 8th place and are getting into better form, to actually make the playoffs. But it also just doesn't pollute playoffs with a much larger than necessary bracket, which I think is probably a better system than the one
that's not a bad idea. Yeah. By the way, shout out to Jat. I see that Jat's actually come full circle, and he's actually back where I was in like 2014. He's just doing webcam videos into like a very basic overlay, and they're getting about 20 to 30k per view. You're just me from 2015 now, Jat. It's like your whole thing. Because I got you fired from Team Liquid, you're just going to be like, I'm going to take this whole man's career. You're doing a good job, though, to be fair. Those are actually good.
He doesn't have the jacket yet, though. That's
that's true, yes. One thing I've always said this, because people don't realize, just because unfortunately, like, I've got central heating in the place I live now. Low key, that actually was a fuck up in my branding. If I go back in time, I should have somehow figured out a way to always keep that, shouldn't I? Because it was iconic, wasn't it? It was iconic. And it sort of fit my vibe, because if people don't know, I didn't do this intentionally, but the fact that I was just some like fucking, do look like that guy from Game of Thrones, the fucking guy from the Wild, and I had that massive coat, and it did, the fact that I've such a sort of like fucking cantankerous personality sort of all fit, didn't it? It did sort of like blend together somehow, didn't it? And also, as mad as it sounds, somehow, I don't know why this makes any sense. There's something dark about this. Somehow fans were okay with me talking shit, Monty, as long as they thought I couldn't afford heat in my house. Once I have the money for that, though, then it was, now I can't be forgiven for anything. So as long as I'm like a pauper or something, that's okay with me talking about something, I don't know. Is that like some jester logic? When I was just the jester, I was allowed to say anything to the king.
Okay, should we talk about some actual games now? Do you want to talk about Misfits a little bit? Because part of this, I think it's important to set the stage for Misfits a little bit, which is why I find this interesting, is that these players really don't have much to play for. I guess VTO does, because his contract's at the end of this year, but They know the org is being sold. Who knows if they've been offered guarantees to their spots with the new Heretics organization? Like, I don't know if they bought out these players' contracts, or who knows.
You look
what
at the way
Heretics...
BDS went, it looks unlikely. I mean, as far as I know, when BDS bought Schalke, they had the option to like offer to those players, like everyone. But if you notice, they basically didn't pick the players up. So even though fans will think, well, they'll just keep most of the players. There's no reason, not necessarily.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, there's a world when 0 of these players play next year, because I'd assume Vethio will go to a better team anyway. And then who knows if they even pick the others. The only other good one, in my opinion, is even Neon. That's it.
Right.
Any other good player.
I mean, I think that part of this has to be, the credit has to be given to Zanzara as well, who is on the, who comes in. Zlatan was not great off the Lee Sin. You have to say it. I think he was an issue, but Zanzara was also a player who was cut from Astralis and who's brought into this team and has shown pretty immediate improvements.
He's been all right. He's been
okay.
He was winning games when he was just Poppy ulting fucking nothing. Like he was just. So he had some games that he was just a spectator for me. But at the end, I'll give him credit. He could win a couple of these latter ones. And also the other thing that Dom made a point, but I think he's totally right. Is it's like teams, because the other LEC teams do think Zanzara's bad. Spoiler, behind the scenes they do, because they thought he was bad. It's like they were drafting him into fucking Nirvana. He was just getting Poppy every fucking game. What was that? Like that was crazy. It's like they were daring him to. I hate. By the way, there's one thing I hate in League of Legends, I'll never understand why people do it, is when you go like, I'm going to dare this, what I call bad player, to beat me on one of the strongest champs in the game. Well, you know what? Good luck with that, I guess. Go for it. Like, guess what? People did that against Armut and fucking Wukong a million times. Like, come on, man. Why are we doing this?
By the way, my Poppy tweet aged like so well. After the buff.
How long ago was that? That was a few months ago now, right?
It was before MSI, because that's when they buffed Poppy. Okay. When I said specifically in April, when the Poppy buffs came through, that this was the cooldown buff to, having her ultimate up more, or like having the speed of her ult happen faster, having the knock up happen longer, as well as having the W on a lower cooldown, and professional level was going to make a massive difference in terms of Poppy's ability to play to the professional level. And it came true.
I'm going to question what you think abstractly about how people are playing with the champion in the game, Monty. Because one thing I'm not a big fan of is, in the same way as a lot of the Western Talias don't actually use the wall like aggressively and as a way to like play make, they just like do it when they have to, right? And one thing I hate about watching the Western Poppies is, dude, they just spam the ult. They just do it as fast as possible. That is an ult I would be holding and make sure I land it on the right target. What do you think? Should you gamble it more? Is it worth just throwing out there?
I think that a lot
to me, that's like the ultimate target selection. If you get it right, you just win the whole fight.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. And it's a lot easier to hit because the projectile speed was increased as part of her buffs. You do have to be like, basically the way the best Poppies use it is they'll like start dragon, and then like when the enemy team comes to contest, that's when you just eject them so you can finish an objective. So you have to coordinate around it very well as a team in order to use it to its kind of most optimum value. There's lots of uses for it. You could knock Rift Herald away when it's about to charge. That can be very helpful for you as a team to deny plate gold. And then also it's a decision making between, do I go in and use this ult to get the 1 second knock up? Like, do I see an angle where I want to use this for CC in order to kill somebody, or do I want to use this for CC to remove somebody from the fight because it has multiple applications? It's very strong as a result, but you do have to be very conscientious as a team about how you're going to use this ult. And you're either going to choose as a team to take the man advantage for an objective, or to take a team fight, and everybody has to be on board with that coming in. This is why it's very good, because it offers extreme flexibility in the way you can play the game, but it's very challenging to use it on a team comms and teamwork level, which is why after these buffs, Poppy took time, because she plays weirdly you have to play weird as a team with Poppy, or differently than you would with most other jungles. So I think, honestly, though, I do think that part of Misfit's success has been the Zanzara pickup, and it's not his individual play aside or his individual skill ceiling. This is a really good meta for Zanzara. He is a tank jungler.
Yeah, of course.
The history of his play, Skarner is his number 2 most picked jungler of all time. Trundle is number 3. He has a 77% win rate on Skarner across 31 games. Okay?
By the way,
Poppy, Skarner,
on Astralis, he has a win rate like that. It's pretty good.
You know, Poppy, Skarner, Trundle, these are Zanzara champs. And so they've also just kind of fit into the meta that way. They got a little bit lucky, or they realized this meta was coming and picked up Zanzara because he was a free agent, and Shlatan is playing these kind of, he's a Lee Sin one trick, basically, if we're going to be reductionist about it. I also think that other factors such as over time, we have seen Irrelevant get better. I think he's been a pleasant surprise.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually gradually gotten better the whole split, yeah.
Neon and VTO, if we think about why Misfits was doing so well and were pulling off upset victories, they were winning based off of late game scaling and being able to create picks into the late game. Now, why in this week?
I'm amazed how teams draft against Misfits. It's probably the most puzzling thing to me. Yeah.
Why is Mad Lions giving Yuumi first pick to Misfits? You have to ban Yuumi against Misfits. That is literally
probably the number one team in the league who don't want to have a supercharged carry. Exactly. That's all they do is win from Vetio fucking Neon. Get that champion out of the game.
So why I was so confused about this game that they played yesterday was because if you just rewind the clock, rewind, and you go back to the last split, and you just look at the games that they play, people will say, oh man, yeah, VTO Akali, look at those picks he was getting late. People never discuss that it was Yuumi on the Akali that was making these plays possible.
It was ridiculous, yeah.
You cannot give them Yuumi because they are good at late game macro. Like, if there's anything Misfits is good at, it is that.
Yes.
Creating opportunities for themselves in the late game. And if you give them that scaling, they will capitalize on it.
That's the part I find so puzzling.
Yuumi.
Basically, I'm not joking, Monty. This is the team that I would be so cynical about my draft. Like, I would essentially draft Monty like I just hate Vetio and Neon. And all I'm trying to do is ruin their game. Because, spoiler, that is all I'm trying to do. If I ruin one of those guys' game, my chances of winning probably go like double. It's ridiculous. Whereas instead, what they do, and this is what I hate about league coaches in general, Monty. True, I know there's a whole scrim economy, obviously I'm not accessing. But the way they draft looks like it's like they never do that. Like, if people don't know, famously, this is what they always say, like in the NBA or whatever, like, shut down the score. But they never do. It's always the opposite. It's like, well, we can just deal with him scoring 40. And then what happens is if that guy scores 50, you just lose the whole game because you just left him open. So, like, I don't know why people, I would genuinely, I know you're supposed to treat all teams like they can all play the meta. I would be so cynical drafting against this team. Because they've gotten so many wins off it. Like, the thing I don't get is this, Monty. I'm not even a hater of Misfits. They started out the split very badly. I would have said they were trash for the first, 2-3 weeks. But I actually think, the players have played way better. As you say, they actually are half decent, know what they do late game. But this is my problem. They don't create that scenario themselves. The other teams help them in draft, then randomly throw in the middle of the game, and then one of those two players carries. Like, the premise is there. Like, if you were those players, you wouldn't even be able to carry the game if other teams, did a different approach against you, in my opinion. Or at least you very rarely would.
Yeah, and they're getting a lot of these big scaling picks. I mean, certainly the meta has shifted into Misfits' favor.
Oh, sure.
It's definitely working out for them. If we talk about Irrelevant's performance, he doesn't actually have to carry this team. He could just play tanks. Like, that's certainly an option right now, which is good considering his level of experience within the top league. And VTO and Neon can carry this roster. Look what's happening. It's a Silas meta. Great for VTO, quite clearly. Neon moving into these hyper carries. Well, that's really good for the way that they play as a team. They are capable of coming back and making up these deficits.
For Neon now is basically what Jinx was for him last split. Like, if he gets that, he's just going to carry the fight, isn't he?
But also, if you are playing against Misfits, don't pick early game compositions. Like, if you are Mad Lions, why are you playing Aatrox and Vi into them? The thing about Misfits is, even if they're at a deficit, they can hold you off long enough. You have to fight them in terms of getting advantages early while also having subscaling. They are not very strong in the early game.
That's what's wild, dude. Both teams that week drafted Vi against them. Both! By the way, I'm also so sick and tired of Western Vibes. Why are you playing it? I know you play it because you saw a fucking LPL player use it. You don't know how to use it. Half of you fucking shit with that champion. It's so, but like, I can tell that's a fucking scrim champion. It's just so obvious, isn't it? Because they pick it like priority as well. Like, it's crazy.
It's also arguably not even good in
Because it's only
LCK.
single target. It's shit, isn't it? Dude, it's a single target champion. What's the point of that?
And if you're going to have a single target champion, the other problem, like a single target lockdown like that, the other problem is you have to have follow up. And if the other team drafts Yumi, Trundle, and Ornn, and then also has a Silas that can steal your own Vi
good luck with that. I know, yeah. By the way, good luck going in on that for a start off, yeah. That's one thing I always wonder about with these coaches, right? I get the premise that, you draft, you look at lane matchups, you look at the overall comp. I'll tell you one thing I wish more Western coaches would look at. All I want you to do is this. Look at your team comp. Now go in your brain. Imagine we're 23 minutes. I'll pick this time very carefully, Monty. We're 23 minutes into the game and we're having a bunch of team fights and skirmishes and your team is 5k behind. Now what I want you to imagine as a coach is imagine what it feels like to engage as your jungler. If the scenario is like, the joke is like you jump in and it's like when Summit went in on that Renekton in Spring and you just get instantly smashed by like 4 people and you can't even hit a single person. You haven't necessarily done a very good comp there, or your team doesn't know how to play. Because, mate, some of these comps, like you're saying, like it's like that one, the other one where they did the Poppy against the one where they did Poppy against 5 fucking champions with dashes. Do you remember when they all drafted into a first pick Poppy?
Yeah.
That was like a match last week. These are like inconceivable drafts because I'm just thinking again, imagine being the fucking other players there, like enjoy the game, enjoy. some of the like, who the fuck wants to be the jungler going into like champions that slow you, CC you, you can't get to them, the backline's moving backwards, kiting you like a motherfucker. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
So yeah, I think Misfits has, they're really benefiting a lot from the current meta. It's back in their wheelhouse.
Well, them and Vitality have done a crazy comeback this split. It's mental, isn't it, how crazy the turnaround's been for these teams.
Well, again, it's Vitality really is a team that was actually really struggling in the early game, right?
Yeah,
and now they can kind of wait out so we can talk about Vitality as well because they're a huge story, clearly. They look really likely to make the playoffs now. It'd be hard for them to get dropped out, especially, I mean, their last week's tough. It's against SK, who is no slouch, Fnatic and Rogue.
Yeah, but they've beaten so many good teams. Like, how can you count them out at this point? Like, there's almost no one they can't beat, as far as I can tell.
Right, and the thing about it too is that if they take out SK, they're going to be sitting really pretty in terms of the standings, and I think they probably win at least one of those games, right, which puts them at 10 wins. Vitality, though, they were struggling in the early game, and the way they were winning was by pulling out some of these late game opportunities. It rarely would come together for them enough, but they've turned. I thought they would never turn this corner, but honestly, like their early game looks a lot better. Haru, especially on the Jarvan, has had much better synergy with the solo lanes.
Laners actually follow him in the jungle now. They can actually do invades and everything. It's amazing. I know.
people were blaming like a lot of issues, I think, with Vitality previously, or saying it was Haru's fault. But Haru was not getting help from Alfarian perks. Like, let's be very clear. Like, he was not getting help. So it was like Haru was operating independently in much the same way that Razork was kind of operating independently from the rest of his team. There were similarities between Vitality and Fnatic in that way. But now,
by the way, now if you're a fan, you know why we always bang on about the Razork topic. Because anytime you have a super team and the jungler's disconnected from the team, that's the number one thing you have to fix. Because as you see here, dude, it's not even like Haru's like the best jungler. He's just slightly better, and that's all that matters. Slightly better is enough to make the whole team look better. They look twice as good, guys.
Yeah, crazy, because they at least always had some level of late game threat that they could pull out.
Dude, that's the most underrated part about the team. In my opinion, the reason why Vitality individually looked so shit is because they were always behind in every game. Think about it, League of Legends, the game gives the person ahead in gold better stats and power in the game. So the problem is it doesn't matter if you have a super team. If you're always playing from behind, you're going to lose a lot of those games. Just logical, isn't it?
Yeah. And so they did lose to Astralis this last week, which obviously I think really hurt them. If they had won that game, they would have been in a much more comfortable position when it comes to playoffs. And they did kind of throw that game a little bit. So I guess it was kind of disappointing. But Vitality still, I'm not totally sold on this team, especially with a rough week ahead. They may be able to squeak into playoffs in a similar situation as they did last split, kind of in 5th, 6th place. But this team still could be dangerous in a best of 5 with the players that they have. Just like we couldn't necessarily instantly count them out of spring split playoffs. I don't think you can do that here either. And after the last few weeks, you have to say that they look like they have finally addressed some of the issues that they had, which I thought was just never going to happen with this roster. And I don't know what the cause of it is that they were able to fix this, but it seems like they have. Which is good because everybody would rather have a strong Vitality. Vitality, if they can get their shit together, could be a very intimidating team at the World Championship based on the strength of their individual roster. And certainly is one I want to see Alfarian perks at Worlds.
Oh, of
I
course,
do want to see that.
I mean, by default, one of the reasons why I always thought Vitality was so underwhelming is because it's like, you know, all the fans who were like, where's Perks doing all this amazing shit? Why was he supposed to? Like, they've lost the game, you idiots. Like, it's not season 3. You can't just 1v9 the game. So, like, the problem is, essentially, they've never given him a platform to actually win some of these fucking games. So, obviously, you want Perks at Worlds. He's one of those clutch players of all time, isn't he? So, and Alfari hasn't been to that many. So, like, yeah, the actual narratives are great for most of the players. The only problem I have is with the way LEC is right now, and with the way every 2 to 3 weeks there's just this mad shift in like power, and people go up and they go down. Who, by the time Worlds comes, God only knows if these will even be the right teams from Europe. Like,
yeah,
this is the biggest crapshoot I've ever seen for LEC. It's crazy.
And also, it's not a good thing. There are different ways. Sometimes you look at a league and you say, oh, wow, all these teams are trading victories. They have very distinct styles. That's what's causing, mismatches in style are creating these upsets. Yep. But you can see like how a team is very good at one specific thing. And that's true to a degree here. But a lot of this is throws, guys. And I would say that overall Europe, because we haven't had a team be able to be consistently dominant, and Excel's a great example of this. They come off strong, really strong off of their boot camp in Korea, and now they're 0-4 in the last.
I mean, the
weeks.
joke is Mad Lions was supposed to be that team until last week. Like when they were 10-3, yeah, everything was great, and they were the one team that had cracked it. We're all good. And the joke is even they just fucking slipped on the banana peel twice and then fucked it up, haven't they? Like every single, because as you say, that's the problem, Monty. Here's the thing: the standings could look the same if it was like this, Monty. Well, Mad Lions beat Rogue every time because Mad Lions has a better early game, but then the Excel lost to Vitality because if you did it like that, like as you say, if there was a reason for each result, doesn't matter. The problem here is if you look who beats who and when, it almost is like some randomizer. It's right. Mad. Like that Mad Lions one I watched. On paper, Mad Lions are supposed to just beat Rogue. They just fucking lost the game consistently. It was ridiculous.
They lost from basically minute one in that game. They got absolutely stomped.
By the way, this is why also, as analysts, we hate best of ones. Because imagine if you'd just done like a 20-minute setup of the game of the week, like we've got Rogue here against Mad Lions. Mad Lions has the best early, and then the game just starts, and from the second one, they're just behind the whole game, and they never do anything. Like, it just ruined the whole fucking setup, didn't it? I know.
and it's also the way that some of these teams lose. So you look at, here's another example. XL versus G2 this last week. It was the Neela Tarek game that XL played. They get a really good kind of early game advantage, and then they dive mid-turret without Tarek ult up. They completely wipe, and then they end up falling behind and sacrificing their entire lead in this game. Or Mad Lions, for example, where they're playing this game, they're puttering along, they actually win an early fight onto the Herald, they get the Herald, and then they just don't use it because they're macroing so badly, they don't put people into the correct lanes, so they never use the first Herald of the game, they're never able to snowball their lead, and Rogue just takes over. So there are a lot of really terrible mistakes that are being made in terms of macro right now that are causing teams not to snowball advantages that they get in the early game appropriately, that are concerning. Like, you shouldn't be confused about how to win a Herald fight and then use the next several minutes to set up a Herald charge onto plates. Like, there shouldn't be a scenario where you just don't use the Herald. And that's what we're seeing. So, I mean, I'm sure the teams are frustrated with a lot of these mistakes as well, but these are not the kind of errors that you're going to be able to make against good Asian teams at Worlds. And
like, dude, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of a game where I was thinking of these topics. It was actually in the Rogue versus Mad Lions game. Because in that game, there was a point right near the end there, Monty, where it was looking like, oh, fucking Rogues like regress. They're going to do that shit where you just wait, bleed away the lead, it gets even, and you just have one big team fighting, you lose. But somehow they actually, like, it's almost like they just accidentally tripped over and won the game. Like, they were looking like they were going to do that. Because that's the problem I have, basically, is this is the real problem in Europe. Even though everyone's done the opposite, Monty, they've all obsessed about the early game. We've had all these people bragging about the Mad Lions early game and then the Rogue early game. No, the main problem right now is the mid game. The problem is this, even Mad Lions, once they got to that mid game, could throw. We all knew that. So my issue is I look at the top LEC teams, mate, and aside from when XL early in the split were living off that fucking high off their own supply shit of being at the boot camp, most teams don't seem to know how to close the game out. Like, it gets mad for, it looks like they just get into a holding pattern where they know, like, right, try and take this Baron, take this fucking Dragon. But that's it. That's all they can do. A lot of them seem like they're just a bit lost in the game. I think also something's changed about, like, that they don't use the word anymore because they overused it, but the fucking tempo of the game has changed.
Well, it has, because so LEC and LCS are on 12.14, which is when the
Isn't it wild that word's never used anymore, by the way, considering, like, obviously if you go to, like, 2016, there was, like, every other word was the word tempo, wasn't it? Like, they never even say it now. It's never ever said now. I know.
I actually think it's a valuable term.
It's good.
Tempo is one thing. I actually don't agree with the, like, I guess it's the idea is, the metaphor is that they're setting the tempo. What I would use, the word I would use instead is priority, like prio, which I think is a better term for it, because it basically means which team at any given point has the move first advantage. If it was kind of a turn-based game, which means that they're dictating the pace of the game, or they're dictating their opponent's reactions. I think that's having prio is generally a better term, although that's usually referred to as to, in the laning, in League of Legends, it's usually referred to as when a player has control over their lane and can move first out of the lane. But it also is like who has priority over an objective, who's there first, who has the wave set up better, who has vision control.
I know what you mean, because the real problem was this: when people used that term, because obviously the term can just mean to do with, like, time, etc. People took it as like, oh, so that means, like, you're making the game faster or slower because it was big time.
Exactly.
It's like, well, no, I'm not doing that. Like, because in that scenario, if you made it slow, but I'm a late game team, isn't that good for me? No, in this scenario, having the tempo was always what you wanted, obviously.
It's basically just control.
Yes.
Control over the game state. In a favorable way, right?
That's mega lacking in the West, mate. Instead, here's the difference. Even though, by the way, these teams used to be terrible. If you go and watch, like, Gen.G when they win these games, mate, they fucking gorilla monkey stomp people to death. They're fucking insane how they close games out. Like, if people don't know, go look at, like, the amount of gold lead these guys have when they're, like, winning these games. It's ridiculous.
We'll talk about Gen.G.
Snowballing out control.
We didn't have a show last week, so we couldn't talk about Gen.G T1, which is clearly, like, an extremely important game on the world stage that we can discuss, especially because Gen.G smash T1 basically. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I think part of these games on 12.14, and part of the instability, is that it's harder to kill dragons now, especially mountain dragons. Like, it takes a long ass time to kill them. They have a lot more HP. We don't know how much the more powerful buffs are going to prioritize teams, how much effect they're going to have on the game state. I mean, they made big changes. They basically doubled the power of a lot of these buffs, or increased it. I shouldn't say doubled, increased it by 50% a lot of the time. They increased the HP of the second herald so that maybe you can get more done with it. They introduced these variables right before playoffs. I think that's because they wanted the maximum amount of time that teams. So they wanted to introduce it now so that teams could get used to it by playoffs. And also, I think this is the last major change they're probably going to make before Worlds. So that at least this is how it should be done, which is that playoffs are played on a pretty similar patch to the World Championship without any major changes being made. So you qualify the correct teams for Worlds in that particular meta. So I think the timing is pretty good. It's not even like 1 week before. You give teams a couple weeks before the playoffs to acclimate. So it seems like a pretty good timing if they're going to make these changes. But I think probably some of the volatility that we saw in Europe was a result of this patch, because it's a lot of meta champion changes, especially in the bot lane, which is like all of a sudden these Sivir changes are making Sivir very high priority, which then makes some other single target champions, like Draven, super high priority, who can bully the Sivir in the lane. We see a lot more Twitch these days. Zeri obviously still a presence. And now, with SK beating Rogue, we're even starting to see some old Sivir counters, because Sivir hasn't been part of the meta for a very long time. Well, what was always a Sivir counter? It was Vayne. And because Sivir's kit hasn't changed, it's more like the fundamental kit hasn't changed. It's more the numbers based around her kit, as well as some other, minor tweaks to how these abilities work. But at a fundamental level, the reason why Vayne was powerful into Sivir is because Vayne can dodge a lot of, dodge Sivir's Q very easily. And Sivir's also low range. So Vayne, as a single target AD carry, can kind of win some of these duels with Sivir, as well as be very good when it comes to late game team fighting and eliminating tanks, right? And playing front to back team fights. So SK pulls out this champion that is also not meta. So we're seeing a pretty big shift, I would say, in the bottom lane. So all these factors together are combining into volatility. And until I don't think anybody knows how to play the proper way around these objectives now that they've been changed. And we're just going to have to wait for the dust to settle on this one. And you combine the fact that LCK and LPL are not even on this patch, right? So that's making it even more confusing in many ways.
One of my favorite,
best.
One of my guilty pleasures in League, Monty, would always be when LCK was a patch ahead, and then they would find a broken champion, and some idiot in EU LCS would force that when it was the pre-nerfed version, they would just make it happen in the game. It's bro, that's not why they're playing it over there. It's a different champion.
So LPL actually did switch to 12-14 in the middle of last week.
Okay.
But it's very new. And LCK will not be on the new patch until this next week, I believe. So we do have to. Yeah, they haven't actually announced that they're changing. LCK has not announced that they're changing to the new patch this week, but okay. It has been interesting.
By the way, I've got an aside, because here's the thing. I've mentioned it on Twitter, but I want to bring this up because I've done that thing again where the curse in esports, if you don't know, especially if you work behind the scenes, is if someone points out something annoying, Monty, you can never not see it again. So in the same way as classic, for example, obviously people have done this with a bunch of things like Freak done, etc. Once you key in on the annoying thing about how they cast, it fucking ruins it. So one thing I've noticed that it's always been a minor peeve, but I've never verbalized it before. Monty, I'll give you a quick analogy. In CSGO, we have a similar thing I'm about to describe. It's essentially where casters, like a moth to the flame, cannot resist what becomes shit casting because you get caught in the hype of the moment and you don't actually cast. So the example in CSGO, you'll have seen it many times, is anytime someone throws a grenade into an area they're not looking at and it's going to go into a group of people, the caster obviously goes oh my, this grenade could be so good. And then let's say in CSGO it does 4 damage, goes behind a wall, doesn't do anything. So obviously then you're just I wasn't actually as great as he thought. But I get why, the guy got drawn into the hype. Dude, the curse is this, because it happens in every game. Dude, it's when Western casters, when people start trying to start a Baron, please, Lord, save us from these fucking Western casters telling us every single Baron ever can be burned down quickly and that they're burning it down now. You said that for every Baron I've ever seen in a 10-year span now, boys. Apparently there's no Baron ever that wasn't going to get completed, that was going down slowly, that isn't being hit and I know it's because you just go reverting into these loops that you go into, but guys, you got to get out of those. I've seen them now say it, Monty, when they're the Barons that are really hard to kill, they're all 5 hitting it, it's still at 2/3 health, and the other team's coming into the pit and they're going, this could burn down real quick. It can't, I'm telling you, I promise you, it can't burn down quicker. The ADC's hitting and everything. I know it, because I want to ask you, because you're a caster, what do you think of that? Because it's just one of those loops I've noticed people just cannot stop getting trapped into.
I have heard occasionally, people talking about that it's slower to kill certain Barons, but also I think that it's just it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in this way, which is that if you have a team composition that kills Baron slowly, you're not going to try to burn it down quickly. So it just doesn't happen, right?
Okay.
they're not going to try and sneak that Baron. They're not going to just try and, fake you out while you're doing Dragon, all of a sudden you run to Baron, or you bait people into the bot lane and then you start doing it if there's enough time to walk across the entire map or for the other team to TP over to you. So most, I think, professional teams just won't do the Baron at that level unless they're fucking bad. So I think to a certain
LCS,
degree,
obviously.
I think it's to a certain degree, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy based on teams that can do Baron quickly are going to try and burn it down quickly. Like if you have a Nazir and a Jinx, like you're just going to go do the Baron as fast as you possibly can. Also, I think that it's probably true that many meta champs are meta because they do objectives quickly, because that is
in the modern day, yeah, of
huge
course.
strategic advantage.
Yeah,
of
course.
So there are multiple factors, but yeah, I think in general, Baron really is pretty easy to do at the professional level for most teams, and maybe can be done too quickly a lot of the time. But in a way, I'm kind of happy it is, because otherwise we just see unending Baron dances where one team would start it and then just pull off. Like you need to be able to kill it in a relatively short amount of time so you can actually commit to the objective and move the game state along. So
every now and then I love the universe because I randomly just glanced over at Twitch chat and the person doing shitty comments has, out of their own volition, chosen to put an any key icon next to themselves. Go ahead, mate. You're a moron, so we don't mind what you say. Anyway, keep going with the episode. Perfect.
So as far as LEC is concerned, let's talk about the potential playoff teams right now, which is that Mad Lions is already locked. G2, Misfits, Rogue, and Vitality are all just completely locked up at 9 and 6. So we have 4 teams tied for second place. And then we have 3 teams who are tied at 7 and 8 who still have an outside chance of making the playoffs. Who could,
by the way, here's also
at 10 and 8.
Fucked the split, Monty. Because when all these teams are even, or half the teams that were the top of the table are now the middle of the table, how do you even judge strength of schedule? How am I supposed to do that? Like if I look and I see they're playing against XL, in theory, I'm supposed to think they're playing someone good. Right now, that's someone bad. If they're playing against Vitality, I'm supposed to now brain fuck myself. They're the best team in the league. Like that's the problem. You can't even look at the Super Week and know who's going to make it, mate. It's the craziest crapshoot I've seen in years.
Right. And only BDS is out because SK, if they win all the rest of their games, and who knows, is it a time for another Gilius miracle run? Like SK has been a pretty legit team the last few weeks. They've gotten better
the last few weeks for sure, yeah.
Yeah. They almost got perfect gamed against Fnatic, but they got absolutely devastated from level 1 based on an invade, and they should have just probably taken a fight in the jungle when that happened. And their tempo was behind. They were playing an early game composition. But then they bounce back against Rogue and they play a surprisingly clean game. They seem like they have a strong game plan. They're playing a better scaling composition. And I think it may have just been a meta misread on the first 12-14 patch coming into this week. But, they could technically steal a playoff spot. Now they have to do it against XL, G2, and Vitality and win probably all those games unless some freak, accident occurs. But we might also be looking into some tiebreakers potentially next week. It is very difficult. Likely. Yeah, it's very difficult to call who is going to be taking some of these games. As soon as you think Fnatic starts looking strong again by almost perfect gaming SK, they come out against... The
crazy one, by the way, is obviously Astralis, because in amongst all that, Monty, we're all looking at the other teams like, will Vitality make it? Will Fnatic? But all that you need is just at the last second, they're just going to fucking sneak over the line. I just know somehow it's going to happen, mate, because they're just too close. They're too close, aren't they? They're right there, guys.
Well, Astralis beat Rogue and Vitality in the last couple of weeks, too.
They're no joke, yeah.
And have they done it in the most beautiful way possible? No. By
the way, think about the logic of this.
Floppy-ass late games, but they win half of them.
That's what's wild. If you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Think of the 2 teams that it's ridiculous win the games. It's Misfits and Astralis. Dude, they win games because they catch all the throws. They really do. These are the teams that can actually catch a throw. Yeah. And the problem, as we described earlier, is every top team can throw. That's Europe at the moment. So no one knows how to use like a 6K gold league for some reason. They just keep playing like it's even or something. I don't know. I don't get it myself.
Like, honest to God, I actually have no idea who's going to come out in this last week because there are too many possibilities. So, for example, XL technically has one of the easier schedules playing Rogue, SK, and Astralis, right? The only gimme game is BDS. And even then, BDS beat XL this last week. Like, if XL wins the BDS match, their road to the playoffs is significantly more clear. They would be at 8 and 8 and at least in playoffs if the season were to end today. They didn't get that done. They played a very bad game against BDS. And I guess my faith in Excel has more or less been shattered at this point in time.
It's lost to too many teams at this point in time. They lost pretty much everyone, it feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And also, another problem they have is they're 0-2 against Fnatic, so they can't be tie-breaked with them. Otherwise, the tiebreaker just goes in Fnatic's favor.
Yeah. And I think if you look at current strength, who would I have the most faith in? I don't think I have faith in Fnatic or XL.
This is to make playoffs, right? Is what we're talking about. Yeah,
just to make playoffs. That's why it's so hard. I guess maybe even I have more faith in SK than I do in Fnatic and XL right now, at least to win individual games. I don't think SK can 3-0 this week, but if I think that XL or Fnatic are legitimately going to win like 2 of their next 3 games, I think that seems unlikely. So I think Vitality, Rogue, Misfits, and G2 have enough of a buffer, all being 9 and 6.
I've just noticed as well.
Dude,
all you need to know is this. Just look at the schedule Astralis has. Astralis plays Fnatic, then they play Vitality. Oh no, sorry, Mad Lions, and then they play XL. So literally, Astralis is probably going to decide who makes it out of Fnatic and XL. They are going to be the fucking. They are the judge.
I mean, they might make it, right?
They're basically Astralis is like fucking what was his name? I can't remember his name. What was the name of that guy in fucking Gladiator? What was the name of the Roman emperor in that one?
Commodus.
Commodus, there you go. They're basically like him doing, should I? And then we the public decide whether XL or Fnatic makes it, don't we? Exactly.
Or Astralis. Like, that's the thing about it, is because they're all 7 and 8, and they all play each other, right? That's the other factor here, is that because Astralis is playing 2 of these teams, they basically can decide, if they win both of those games, they basically just kick XL and Fnatic out of the playoffs, right? Yes. So their fate is in their own hands, and it's a good place if you're Astralis, I think, because they have been pretty good over the last few weeks, and they have been trending upwards.
Logically, they're the team that everyone's going to look past in this Super Week, aren't they? Because everyone's practicing for the biggest teams, yeah. They're even going to get sort of like they're going to draft into it, as it were, yeah.
And also, if they win against XL, they're going to own the XL tiebreaker at 2-0. Which is also huge. So probably their most important match is going to be versus XL, because that means even if they're tied, they still own the tiebreaker heading into playoffs. Whereas if they beat Fnatic, they're tied 1-1, which might trigger a tiebreaker. I guess I actually don't know the specific rules about LEC, whether or not there are tiebreakers or they go to average game time. It's probably a tiebreaker that you would play, I would assume, because average game time is garbage. And XL, the other factor too, is that XL currently are 2-0 over Fnatic, so they own that tiebreaker. So the end of this is going to get really hairy. I guess I prefer Astralis' odds.
You're right. Yeah, go on.
I guess I prefer Astralis' odds simply because they are in control of their own fate, and because I feel like they at least have. I see the way they win games, whereas XL and Fnatic, it just seems completely arbitrary. Seems completely arbitrary a lot of the time.
It's also wild because they have the 1-0 lead on XL, like you say. That just adds a little bit extra shading in that as well. Because if you notice, the problem with the playoffs now, once you're trying to calculate, is it's not even like where you placed. It's like where you placed, and you head to head, then you circuit like fuck off. Like, it's ridiculous. How many factors do I have to factor in here? Come on. And then you head to head.
So I guess I'm taking XL, Fnatic, and SK not to make playoffs, which is pretty wild. That's pretty wild.
One of the points people are going to miss is this. When XL were at their peak, right, when they were even like the top team in the league, one of the points I always made on the Best Damn League show is the reason why it's hard to get fully behind them and say, right, now they win the LEC is because their team isn't really based around like superstar carries. It's more like, they actually remind me more of like a Korean team, mate. They just try and play a correct macro essentially and just draft the proper draft champions. Well, the problem with doing that approach, by the way, is when your team's really good, it's going to look amazing. But when the team has any drop off at all, because it's the strength of the unit that makes you survive, your players are going to look shit because the individual player strength doesn't carry XL. So my problem is this, Monty. I had a hard time getting fully behind them when they were on top. When they're a bit shaky, I start to get worried they're just going to miss playoffs, mate.
Well, the other problem is Mickey X has had some pretty bad individual games, which is, par for the course. Like, he's
by the way, that's what shows you, by the way, how up and down this split's been. If you try doing like an MVP for this split, dude, it's impossible. Unless you're just taking, 2 weeks ago it was Niski off some of the Mad Lions.
I still think it's Niski, but
aside from that, because every team's had the up and down of first half or second half of the split, there aren't even obvious candidates if you think of that role. It's pretty hard to pick.
I think the leader is definitely Niski, but I don't think there's going to be a clear
Oh no, it's not like that. The last
we have
split,
to wait. It's actually crazy that we have to wait until to see this last week of competition before we can even say who should be the MVP of this league.
Yeah, we do.
I think Niski is the front runner right now. But if you look at Excel, like Mickey, he's been a streaky player. Sometimes he has weeks where he ends. That's always been true of him. And Finn also is a highly variable player. We have seen, people will shit on Finn for the last few weeks and possibly justify it. He's had a shaky individual performance. But he also had games where he was absolutely carrying Excel.
Earlier in the split, he was for sure. If you go to like the middle of the split, he was one of the reasons they were really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's just a player that has had a high ceiling and a low floor. And unfortunately, his floor is coinciding with Mickey X's floor.
Agreed.
And I think those are probably the two biggest factors that are happening right now, is that the individual performance of Excel has been dodgy. And I think Excel can absolutely still win. I think they just need to get Mickey onto some more less squishy champions. Let's put it that way, because it's been these Bard and Nami games where he just gets caught out and dies. And then I think you got to just get Finn back on some of these tanks where he's going to have less of, you can kind of stabilize or make his performance more consistent by having him in that tank role, and then just open up Patrick and Nuke Duck to actually do things on the map. But
by the way, that's one of those areas though where sometimes I actually want to just like reach in and tell Nelson, like, stay out of this one, mate. Because like when they drafted that like fucking Lucian Nami bot lane for XL, it's like, homie, I like watching Asian League of Legends too, but this ain't it in the West. Like, that's garbage in the West. Like, yeah, I know it's fucking amazing if the LPL bot lane does it perfectly, or like fucking Death to someone. Like, we're not going to do that in the West. It's garbage. Stop drafting that.
Also, XL first picked LeBlanc on blue side, which that's not good. I get
this.
I get what you're doing, but also Silas exists, and LeBlanc just doesn't do enough damage these days in some of these team fights to be relevant. And then you can't first pick LeBlanc and then also take Neela Tarek and run this very experimental bot lane where you're debuting this new champion, and then not have a very good idea about how to play the game state out, which they didn't, because they made mistakes in their macro play, which caused them to lose the game. I think it could have been good, but there's just taking a non-priority champ first pick and then also running a very weird experimental bot lane is just, I think it's too much burden for a team to shot call and macro pop properly under those conditions. They took a risk. It didn't pay off versus G2. They end up losing that game, which again, they don't have room to lose right now. And they certainly couldn't afford another 0-2 week by losing to BDS as well. So they've been hoisted by their own petard, more or less. Like, it seems that some of this damage is self-inflicted to a degree.
By the way, since we're talking about all these teams that are down there, I notice we haven't talked about Fnatic yet, Monty. I have a specific topic I want to address here because it's a historical topic as well. Mate, this just shows you how, one of my favourite sayings of all time, I don't know who said this quote, I think it was someone famous, like some politician or something, or like HL Mencken or something. You know that quote that says, if you give a man a reputation as an early riser, he can sleep till noon. Dude, that is fucking Humanoid this year. This is a disgrace. Like, I'm not joking. If this was any other player, then I would say, I think the only player that could also survive this is Caps. He's the only other one that could int like this and get away with it for a while. Like, as you see, by the way, dude, Perks can play great and get fucking criticism. Humanoid's play this split has actually been, in my opinion, shameful. Because the worst part of it is, it's not that he's just inting guys. He's actually playing, like, in my opinion, just way too disrespectfully. Every fucking level 3, you just know he's going to die to the enemy jungler. It's mental. I even saw one this last weekend, Monty, where he was seeing the ward. It was warded, and he still let the guy come in and kill him. Like, mate, all I think of is this, right? People will know I'm obviously mates with Upset. Imagine being the ADC in these games, and then your mid laner just dies at level 3 every time to the enemy jungler. To the enemy jungler as well! The guy who's coming to fuck your game up 3 minutes from now. Like, that's got to be the most frustrating experience of all time, mate. And then also, spoiler, who's the other inter on that team? Fucking Illisang. He just ints all the time as well. Like, bearing in mind, LEC in a ULCS has always been about mid lane strength. I think this guy is just tanking their whole split. Like, I hate to blame one person in terms of Humanoid, but mate, he was supposed to be the panacea. He is the god player who everyone plays around and will shot call and lead and win the lane, and he's going to be our Western Chovy, and that he's This is a really bad split in my opinion. It's one of the worst. It's like egregiously bad because, as I say, it's one thing if you just play and you just lose, that you'd had a bad game. This guy doesn't see. He almost has like an ambivalence to whether he wins or loses, which might seem good when you win because it makes you seem like, oh, it's cool under pressure. It almost seems like he doesn't care that they're losing. That's what I get that vibe almost.
I think what's so confusing to me is that when you look at the way Razork and Humanoid are playing, it's like they're not even talking to each other at all. They are sharing no game state details. They are operating as though the other person's like game state doesn't exist. And it is very easy for professional players to be like, I am out of mana, I am pushed up, or I am pushed in, don't do this thing. So I'm not sure who is to blame in this scenario because it's impossible to tell from the outside. Yeah. All you can see is that their early game comms are clearly garbage. Like, because it's very basic mistakes that they're making that could be remedied just by one player being like, I can't help you right now, so play more passively.
Oh, mate, they're one of the number one
in comms.
It's funny because in the last split, I always used to think the best thing about Fnatic was the go button. Mate, that go button needs a fucking safety trigger on it. You know what I mean? Like, that go button, they stop pressing that button, fucking Humanoid.
I also find it funny that people are, like, blaming Yamato for drafts, whereas, like, I actually think some of Fnatic's drafts have been quite good. We roll back to a few weeks ago.
Also, mate, listen, obviously this is pure speculation. I'm not saying this from inside info and knowing players. Just as an outsider speculating, dude, these drafts look like the player asked for these champions. There's no way he's trying. Like, if you think Yamato's sitting there and he's going like, "Here you go, Humanoid," there's no way they're asking. I guarantee they're asking for these champions, mate. It looks like these look like what a player in scrim wins on and asks for in the game.
I mean, it's also, I just think, error from the team in terms of how to play out comps correctly by the Fnatic players. You go back a couple weeks and you look at their like Morgana Caitlyn game. That was a good draft where they got really good advantages, and they just completely failed to push that advantage that they got from the Morgana Caitlyn. It's like Yamato gave them good tools to use, and they initially used those tools well. But there has to be a way that you play out that draft that they, it's unusual in this meta for players to pick that lane, but you have to play it out properly, and they completely failed to continue to push their edge. Now, you look at the game against SK this week, which is a very clean game that they played overall, and you see the Sivir come in with the Yuumi. Okay, they're going to play Kog'Maw Lulu against this Akali, so they see the Akali pick come out against SK Gaming, and they realize, this team has Wukong, Sivir, Yuumi, Akali. There's very low range. We have a huge front line of Azir, Trundle, and Ornn. What if we just pick Kog'Maw Lulu right now? Who the fuck is going to kill this Kog'Maw? Like Akali with a wild growth? No, you have an extreme peel from the Azir ult as well. It was a really good draft from Fnatic, and it made it very easy for them to win this game once they got these early advantages because everyone was low range on the side of SK. They even, here's an interesting point about Fnatic. Things that Yamato can control. Well, he can control level 1 invades. So what happens? Oh, they have a set play at level 1.
Ones, yeah.
They have a set play at level 1. They invade the enemy jungle to disrupt the Wukong's pathing early and set him behind with a team composition that needs to get shit done in the early game. Otherwise, the scaling advantage is absolutely huge for Fnatic. And you know what? You know what prevents Razork and Humanoid from having garbage synergy? Well, an early game invade where the other jungler can't exploit that. It was actually brilliant. Here's what Yamato did. Intelligent team composition design based on what the enemy showed. Level 1 to hide your flaws so that you can scale into the late game and eliminate the point in the game where Fnatic has been weakest, which has been early game lack of synergy and that being exploited by enemies between Razork and Humanoid. So they can't fall behind early because the jungler is so far behind he just has to farm. You get a free ticket to scaling and you have a good composition to the enemy composition. I don't know how you look at Fnatic and think that Yamato is the problem here. Like,
that's why they do it though, Monty. They do it because of that shit.
Band-aids all over his fucking team to prevent them from being exploited in the way they have been in that game. It was a good game plan.
Like, here's the thing. Obviously, on one level, first of all, Yamato does do the grabs and intentionally play defense and take some of the blame on himself, etc. So there is that. But I think the other reason why, Monty, is because, like everyone else in fucking League of Legends, fans just do this thing where they take a static screenshot of you and you're never allowed to change. So because their screenshot is Yamato at like Season 8 Worlds doing that speech for Vitality, their whole thing is like, oh, he's just a hype man. He has not, it's just good. He just wears a suit and then says things that sound good, but he doesn't know anything. Because here's the joke, Monty. Because these are people who are good at nothing, they can't handle the idea someone who's good at one thing could be good at 2 or 3 things. That's my take.
I don't know. I look at Fnatic and I see a bunch of drafts that are good, that can get advantages. I see him playing in a way that appears to be hiding his strength, the weaknesses of his team in order to get victories, but he cannot fix some of the problems in these games. Like, you can't guarantee that a level 1's going to work. You can't guarantee that you're not going to fall behind super hard in the early game. And you contrast that to the G2 game that Fnatic played this week. Well, G2, what do? They prioritize early game. Here comes Jankos on Pantheon Jungle, which was recently buffed. Oh, we've got Caps on Sylas, one of his all-time great champions, that can control the lane and can do very well in terms of late game, especially against Azir. We see Sylas picked into Azir all the time in other leagues.
Again, really,
and then Draven.
I should really save this for competitive edge, but I actually did while you were doing that watch party. I was watching like LEC on my side monitor while I was doing something else, and I remember looking over and going, oh, nice one, at least Fnatic's going to win. And then I turned away, I'm not even joking. It did like 10 minutes of work. And then I looked back on it. It was when they were just losing all those team fights. Oh, fuck. And I knew we were wrecked. Like, because there's another one, like, I actually thought we were going to win that one. Because if people don't know, we picked Fnatic in that one because they had the 2.5
like 2.5 odds. Yeah,
it was looking like they were going to win that. There's another game that just fucking blew in it.
Yeah, and realistically, like, why should G2 be able to get these huge early game advantages? Like, they shouldn't be able just to
G2 isn't even a good early game teammate. I know.
They shouldn't be able to first rotation Draven blind. Yeah. Like, Draven is not the more That's teams, to be fair, in this meta with other strong champions, Draven is more blindable than he was previously. But if you see the Draven, you should be able to do something about the Draven, especially when you're playing an Ezreal Azir composition. Like, come the fuck on, guys. But if you get bodied in the early game, which G2 was able to pull off once again, and like you said, some of this was Humanoid, again, being too vulnerable. Fnatic just, it's like they can't help themselves. They are just going to randomly die in the early game. And the question is whether they can avoid that fate by having level 1s to kind of just stagger their opponent a little bit long enough for them to like come online. Because if they can get into the mid and late game and they're on a scaling composition, they can wait out a game. I will say, if they have to push an advantage they get, like we saw with Caitlyn Morgana, that didn't go so hot because they had to play a little faster than I think they wanted to, and they're a little bit too reactive as a team. But I don't think this issue is a coaching issue.
I'll give you another reason, right? Here's another thing, right? This is why I just don't believe these idiot fans. Because if you know anything about super teams, that I don't believe there's any... Listen, I could be wrong on this, obviously, Monty. I don't believe there's a universe where Wonder was like, why are you drafting me, Jarvan? I never asked for that. It's not even a top lane chat. Because, you know, everyone was blaming that. The second Fnatic lost, it was like, Jarvan, it was just a Jarvan. You idiots, when the champion was drafted and it was initially doing half decent in lane, you were all going like, this is a really interesting pick. Maybe it's going to be strong. Oh, he has known that. And obviously it's Wonder, by the way. Someone who's famous for like first time in champions, picking off meta champions. Like, by the way, this is why I think it's in such bad faith people act like he was drafted against and fucking wrecked or whatever. Everyone had Wonder as like their best top laner of the split. That's like the one player on Fnatic everyone was giving the credit to. Like, that's not an egregious draft. You can try that. I've no doubt. I would bet money. I would bet dollars to donuts, mate. He asked for that Jarvan pick. He wanted to play that. I don't even, the coach in the West is forcing you to play that. Come on.
I don't even think it's. It
wasn't that bad. He was fine.
Like,
that wasn't why they lost.
You have to look at who they're playing into. Like, you can lock down the Draven. You can kill the Draven. Jarvan's damage got buffed on this patch. Like, his point is you can control the Draven. You can control the Pantheon potentially as well. You can control the Renata Glass. Like, you can set up these team fights. I don't think it's terrible. He also can be very difficult to deal with in lane. So that wasn't the issue here. The issue was just, you know, a lot of early game deaths again. And
who are these folks, right? And they sit there, they watch, right? The champions come in, they go in the Wraith, come on. Level 3, Humanoid goes and just dies around mid lane, and then they go, fucking Yamato. Is that what Fnatic fans are? Is Fnatic fans that fucking guy on the bike, and they're riding along, and then Humanoid just fucking, Humanoid's the stick, and he goes into the wheel and just fucks the whole bike, and then when they fall over, they go, fucking Yamato drafts. Like, yeah, that's Fnatic right there. That's nailed it. A Dandion or whatever, get on that. That's your next fucking project. Because by the way, if people don't know, on this channel as well, you'll also find those little clips that we do, where it's like highlight clips or omnibus clips. Like we just did one recently. The guy who's our editor did one about like that LS topic when Sven came on the show. He like condensed all that topic. So we're also doing some little like highlight stuff that's on this channel, by the way.
Yeah, and you'll see more of it too. He's doing a great job.
It was pretty funny. Yeah, he's got some good stuff.
We've got a like a meme clip he made about Wolf that you'll see on the Monty and Wolf show pretty soon. That's.
I've got one I'm going to put on my Instagram today. There's just image he randomly made me, which is like a Russian, like Orthodox Russian icon style of me, like I am esports. And they're like, oh, it's actually banging. It's great. I love that shit. I'm trying my alley.
Yeah, it's very good. Okay, so let's talk about LCK a little bit because I think we have to discuss the T1 Gen.G game that occurred. It was.
Can we just do a break for the toilet for like 1 minute?
Oh yeah, we can do a break, guys. So before we do, obviously the show is still brought to you by esportsbet.io.
The entire thing.
The entire thing this time. The whole show brought to you by esportsbet.io. We're going to take a quick break. While we're taking that break, you too can sign up using our referral link below here on the Twitch channel. Play along for free with predictions using DJT for the World's Prediction Series. You can win up to $300,000. You also get 50 additional DJT for every dollar of crypto you deposit, should you like to do it that way. So take a quick break. We'll be back.
Right, we're back. So let's talk about LCK.
Let's do it. So yeah, a lot of you probably saw the T1 versus Gen.G match that happened. Finally, the prophecy was complete. We finally got the win that we should have gotten for a lot of this. Well, for the previous time, honestly, T1 stands always disagree and think T1 should have won that game. But realistically, Gen.G has been the better team this split, and I am so glad to see them get over this hump because I think a lot of it was mental, and I think if they don't win this best of 3, they may have just lost in playoffs as well.
I know what you mean, but the other problem is this, Monty. I've also been around a few rodeos, and this looks like the crazy sharpest razor cake to ever be constructed.
Oh, great.
You know what I mean? It does though, doesn't it? Because I have to say right now, I'm going to say the sentence, which is the ultimate final last words. There looks like there is no reason this team can be beaten in LCK. Like no one in theory should be in a best of 5. No one should be able to beat this team in a best of 5, dude. No one. Not in LCK, like maybe an LPL team, not LCK though. So like I agree, like this is essentially this is where they actually properly take the throne. Like they are the best team in Korea, far and away. Maybe the world, who knows?
Yes. Yeah. I mean the series, the first game was a little bit close. We did see a lot of like it was somewhat expected. Like on the Gen.G side, you saw the Draven and the Lee Sin being banned, so they went after more. Even though Draven, I think, is more meta, they went after more pocket picks that were enabling T1's early game. And we just saw, I mean, the jungle pool got absolutely devastated in this series. Like the first game alone, we saw Vi, Wukong, Poppy, Draven, Lee Sin, Viego, and Jingle. There were 7 junglers banned. And it led to this Nocturne versus Skarner game. And although we have seen more Skarner play, it has slowed down the pace of Gen.G's games. And I think why this series, and honestly, their series, Gen.G series this week against Damwon Kia, which they also won, although they did drop a game, were so important, was that we got to see an iteration of Gen.G that's playing from behind. And so much of this split has been Gen.G just absolutely dominating the early game to the tune of like 5, 6, 7, 8,000 gold lead, that there was a bit of a doubt of what happens if they are slowed down. What happens if they have to play from behind? What happens if they have to play in an even or losing state into macro into the late game? And the answer is they're still really fucking good. And they're able to pull off these comebacks. They play very measured in terms of when they're behind, especially T1. This first game was so good in this series. We see T1 putting on the pressure very early on, grouping up as 5, diving, getting these big gold leads. And Gen.G, they play away from the action. What was so interesting is that they get themselves back into this game, and they did against Dom too, by just putting Chovy in a side lane, playing conservatively, letting Chovy farm up, farm up, farm up, farm up. And then Chovy just comes in and absolutely just devastates these teams. And that's the other factor that we always wondered. Okay, so what happens when Chovy and his lane empire, can he become a real team player that has mid and late game macro sense? And at least with Peanut telling him what to do, because Peanut is the major voice in the Gen.G comms, the answer has been yes. Even if he's just off on his own doing his thing in a side lane, you have confidence that he's going to do well. But he has just been powering up in their games these last couple of weeks from deficits and just doing incredible things on Azir and on Silas in particular. And these have always been Chovy champs. But the fact that he just roars into the mid and late game, having been funneled all of this CS by his team, and then completely carries these fights is really fun to watch. And Gen.G has had better stability and comeback potential. So for me, this was not only the landmark of beating T1, overcoming that hump, but also playing without a lead and showing that they are smart enough to play passively, to play conservatively, to get the gold onto the right people, and then knowing when to strike, knowing when to team fight, when they're able to actually win some of these fights again with their team compositions. And it's been really good to watch.
Yeah, if people don't know, basically, Chovy had sort of like a rep as if he was like the Korean Alfari, as it were. Like everyone obviously acknowledged he was a god tier laner, but the question was, why do Chovy teams never seem to do as well outside the lane, and especially in the last few years? The point you're making there, Monty, about comms, if people don't know, one thing even LS would say himself, even when Chovy was in like the bad DRX, was that like the reason he also thought Chovy was a genius is apparently he just barely comms. He just doesn't speak. He just does whatever he's doing, and you just have to intuit whatever the fuck, what mysterious way God is moving today. So like actually looks like Peanut's like fucking nailing it. He's band-aided it in that regard. And if you don't know now, the brilliant thing about this team now is on paper it always was going to look good because of the names. But not only do they play as a team, but as a result, both Chovy and Ruler are just absolutely smurfing some of these games. They're just having games where they just drop like 11 kills on people and just monster the whole game. Like they really might be the best in the entire world at their roles. There's mental in it.
Yeah, and it's actually crazy because Ruler is one of the only like really good Lucian players that we've seen. This is a guy who,
he's the reason people are doing the fucking Lucian army lanes. Exactly. This is what Nelson watches and then goes, "Hey, Patrick and Mickey, play this, boys." It's like you ain't Ruler and fucking exactly.
Those of you who have watched Ruler, he seems to just do more damage on Lucian than anybody else. He can actually play it very efficiently in the late game, and then so you can't give him that. But if you give him the Zeri, he's also just insanely dominant on this champion. Ruler is peaking at the right time. Even Doran, who I am a notorious hater, has been doing much, much better on an individual level so far this split. He's had a good diversity to his champ pool in terms of playing both tanks and even assassins and carry top laners. He's been looking really, really good overall. And what's scary is that Gen.G is one of the things that you'll notice about the second game that they played is they gave Peanut Poppy, which nobody should ever do right now. They banned it in the first game of the series and decided that the Skarner was more of a threat because he was just targeting the carries and able to get away with these instant explosion picks in the late game in game number 1. And you know what's interesting is T1 thought they had an answer. And that answer was, we're going to play Zeus on Ornn. And you might think that's weird. Well, why would Ornn counter Poppy? Well, he was doing things that I had never seen before, which is that he was using Bellows Breath, which is Ornn's like dash ability. And so he was basically, it makes you unmovable. So it has a 0.75 second, so 3/4 of a second cast time.
This is actually some genius if you understand what he was trying to do here. This is like some Matrix level shit. No, it's more like anime. Like I knew you would do this, so I did that.
He was saving his Bellows Breath, and he was going to objectives, and Poppy was like charging the hammer, and then he would reactively use the ability just to like body block it, but he wouldn't move, right? And I was like, holy shit.
Such a genius, isn't it?
He was doing it consistently too, which is really hard to do, especially when they increase the Poppy move speed. And yeah, this is really, really like, it was fun to watch because you could see like the level of preparation that went into this match by both teams.
That's why I love LCK, because the execution can just be at the highest level. The shit they can do is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's like they had a plan to deal with the Poppy. So they were going to ban it game one. If they let it through, they were going to pick the Ornn. And if they picked the Ornn, the entire team had to play in a way where the Ornn was going to block the Poppy ult before they engaged. So even though SKT did lose that game, you could see a lot of the thought process and execution that these teams were doing. So I think this was a really fantastic series to watch overall. I think that T1 didn't play badly. In fact, in game one, T1 played amazingly well in the early game. They played incredibly well around their pick composition, around the Twisted Fate. But Gen.G, they will just melt away on the map now. We saw this against Damwon Kia. If you get these big leads against them, they just disappear. Like, they won't fight you.
I will say though, Monty, the word "if" is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting right now in that sentence, though, because as you say, like, if we can just get ahead of them, how are we gonna do that? Like,
they
chance would be a fine thing.
They lost an early game to T1 in game one, and they lost early game to Damwon Kia. And what they did is they just play away from you. And they just funnel resources into Chovy. Chovy's just sitting there in a side lane. They don't drop a lot of minions or waves on the map. They play the wave states very intelligently, and then they slowly get themselves. It's not even really back into the game, because you look at the gold leads and the teams are still ahead, but they have better scaling compositions, and they will just funnel the gold onto Chovy, and then Chovy does amazing Chovy things, and they win. It's impressive to watch. Even the game they lost against Damwon Kia, they almost won, and they had a huge deficit in the early game in that one. So Gen.G looking comfortable, very comfortable from ahead, just able to quickly snowball games if you get that advantage, and they like to play aggressively. If they can't play aggressively because Peanut has been banned into oblivion and he's on like Skarner, okay, well, they farm to level 6, then they create picks and they enable Ruler to just absolutely capitalize on these games, and they'll pick scaling compositions that have the capacity to come back.
Poison, mate. That's why,
exactly.
If you can ever make, like, this isn't a true super team, but teams that have like enough big name players together, the reason in League it's always OP if it works is because someone just gets draft priority for no reason. Like in this scenario, if I put these players in other teams, Monty, I put Chovy on DRX and I put fucking this guy, like the joke is like Ruler or Chovy, you're going to get banned out. But in this scenario, you ban out Peanut, and then it's like, right, which one of these two do we want to fuck us over this whole game? I guess we take that guy. You know what I mean? Like, how do you choose that? So there's no good choice on that one.
Yep.
They're gonna get you no matter what.
I think it's rough.
That's also why I even love, like, thinking the composition as well, and then which player you're gonna have as your support player. A guy even known for like looking for weird off meta picks and lehens, etc. Like, this is like a fucking draft Nirvana.
Yeah, I think it's a really good time to be Gen.G. I don't think they're going to be tripped up by any of the other meta changes that are they've only been on 12-13, but I don't think they're going to be tripped up by any of the meta changes that have been coming down so far.
Also, this reminds me of that narrative that we had, but it just didn't play out in the end. Well, it did technically in a way. You know, when Team Liquid first got Jensen, and the story was like, well, this is perfect, Monty, because Doublelift's had all the domestic success of what LCS, but Jensen never has. But then Jensen's had, like, top 4 at Worlds and the international. But then everyone was like, oh, together. And in a way they did, because they made MSI semis, but they didn't do anything at Worlds, obviously. Well, in the same scenario, obviously, Rulers won Worlds. Now, Chovy can only fucking dream of winning Worlds, because he just goes to the Worlds and then watches the semi-finals, doesn't he? Meanwhile, obviously, good old Ruler's never won the LCK, has he? So that's what they want to do with fucking Chovy. So together they're going to win LCK and Worlds. There you go.
I think this team is looking very dangerous, capable of competing with some of the LPL teams.
Oh, and by the way, if this team wins Worlds, LS will be absolutely insufferable at Chovy. You understand? Like, we'll never bring him back to earth from that one. He will just exit forever, never to return, I'm afraid. Like, but it'll be well deserved. He'll have put in his years, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Chovy, we couldn't have anticipated that Chovy would ever solve Chovy's issues.
It looked to me like last year, especially, I thought he was hard stuck at that level, mate, because he just looked like he's also gone into that player sweats, like, because his teams were all flawed. They have to let him play that way. You know what I mean? Like, that ruins players, mate. I've come to this conclusion over the years from seeing players like my mate Forgiven. I even think this happened to Alfari to some degree. It just ruins Froggen. It just ruins you when you're the good player on a bad team. You just start playing selfishly, unfortunately. You have to do it. you know?
Yeah, and I think just from talking to Arnold, who's the Gen.G CEO on the Monty and Wolf show, he said that a big part of the attraction to Gen.G and why he selected that being there was because of the structure they wanted to provide, and that they have, they have more coaches, they have personal trainers, they have all of these things in place to help out. And I think probably at this point in his life, remember, Chovy's still very young. Like, he
Yeah,
started
yeah, for
very
sure.
young as a professional
Yes.
player. And I think that all of this failure in a way was probably very good for him because it diminished his ego a bit. As good as he was individually, I think eventually he realized that he needed this support
Yeah,
in
mate.
order to reach his potential. And
Chovy is
probably,
only, he's less than 21 and a
oh
half.
yeah, yeah, he's
That's
yeah, he's
mental, isn't it?
21. Yeah. So he's got a long career ahead of him, but I think finally he came to the realization where he wanted that support. He wanted the coaching in order to reach the next level, and you have to want the help before the help can actually make an effect on you. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. It also probably helped to have a legendary player like Score that he can respect coaching him, and some of the like Mafa and some of the other players who have become coaches on this Gen.G roster, as well as all the structure they've had, and the teammates that are around him right now really seem to want to support him. And Peanut is a strong shot calling voice within this team, and he's making a big difference when it comes to their macro and their comms. So this seems like a very well constructed team. Chovy gets the resources he wants and needs to carry. It's very clear that that's the case, and that Doran is willing to play third fiddle to Ruler and
Oh,
Chovy.
that's what's perfect, mate. That's exactly why I actually don't mind him in this team. I know why you didn't like him, 'cause in some other teams he actually was required sometimes to be a carry threat. In this team, what I love is he's got the old classic team top laner's job. Just don't die and let us win the game. There you go. That's actually easier. Just don't die. Because he actually half decently fits their team now. I think most of the times he's pretty good. We'll see in playoffs, obviously.
Yeah, we'll see in playoffs. But it was a tough test this last week, and I think what's underrated, Thorin, is that had Gen.G not lost game two to Damwon Kia, which was a very close game that Gen.G almost won, they would have tied T1's record for longest individual game winning streak from the Champions Winter
Oh,
2013
okay.
2014, where T1 went through the entire tournament without losing a game. So they were I think it's 17, and it was 18-0 that SKT was that split. And honestly, had they been able to do that, especially with wins over T1 and Damwon Kia, yes, it was just regular season. Yes, T1's wins, a lot of that streak came in the playoffs, right? They went 9-0 in the playoffs over 3 best of 5s. But at that point, that's actually more impressive to me than T1's match streak in the spring, because T1 lost a lot of bad games in
Oh
their
no, I
in
was
their
going to say this. I mean, we did a good job trying to battle the narrative as it was being built, but like that wasn't the greatest split of all times because they went undefeated,
No.
guys. And in
Yeah.
fact, as you pointed out, because that was about series, not games, Gen.G almost did it with series and games, guys. Like this really could have been like the greatest split in the history of League of Legends. It almost
Right.
was.
Right. And so you have to remember that Gen.G only lost the one series so far to T1. But had they been able to do this with individual games, because again, T1's victories came with 2 wins over Gen.G, their strongest opponent, without their full roster, right? Um, they lost a lot of sloppy games. Gen.G almost just like has nuked everybody, just 2-0ing them. And they were really close to doing it again. That record will still stand for T1 because of the series versus Damwon Kia, but it definitely could have happened again. And in my mind, would have been the more impressive result if we are comparing T1's match streak versus this Gen.G, like just pure game win streak that was going on. And I think, their last 2 matches here are versus Fredit, Brion, and KT. They are overwhelmingly likely to win this split at 17-1 in terms of match score. You have to believe that they're probably going to 2-0 the next series, although KT is pretty good, so maybe they drop a game to KT. But they've only dropped 4 games so far, guys, and 2 of those games were to Damwon Kia, and 2 of those games were to T1. And that's it. No one else has even taken a game off of them.
Oh, it's mega impressive. It's why I said earlier, essentially, like the caveat I added is the only one you can add. Forget LCK. It's now just about, is there LPL teams that will beat this Gen.G team? And the problem with that, if you haven't been watching the last few years, spoiler, it's not about if you watch LPL. I actually do watch LPL. The problem with LPL is this. They never play the fucking same in the LPL body as they do at Worlds. So spoiler, it's impossible to predict those teams. So I think there probably will be some amazing matchups, but who knows yet? We'll have to see, right? We'll have to see what team.
Yeah, and to compare...
What I would like to see, though, is a random aside, because no one really knows yet from the LPL. Again, it's another league that loads of teams can make it through. If they can get to Worlds, one team I would actually like to see play Gen.G, though, is RNG. And that's because I just want to see, if anyone can fucking maybe do something in the mid-game, I'll put it with my boys, fucking Ming and Zhao. They might actually have the cure to the... And if they can, by the way, they just have the goal. Like, nothing can deny them at that point.
I think what's interesting about heading into Worlds is that there were a lot of question marks surrounding T1 heading into MSI because they were playing basically one style and we didn't know how they would react to a different meta. What's impressive about Gen.G is that the last couple weeks answered a lot of questions about what happens if they don't get these early advantages? What happens if they're not several thousand gold ahead? Can they still close these games? And they played a very different style where they were behind and they had to macro well from behind. And to me, that answers a lot more questions. So I feel much better about Gen.G right now heading into Worlds. Again, with the caveat, LCK is not on 12-14 yet. We haven't seen them play with these big new changes to neutral objectives in the early and mid game. So we still have to wait on that one. But at least at first glance, I feel better about Gen.G being a more complete team than I did about T1 heading into MSI. But like you said, this is the most delicious razor cake of all time.
Oh,
Maybe it is.
I mean, the reason why this one's the best Monty is because just like the best KT ones, this is a razor cake that doesn't even end unless they win Worlds. So you get the ultimate razor cake.
True. That is
and
true.
And then here's the other thing I want to ask you about is this. Because it's all well and good, Monty, shadow boxing Gen.G against RNG and top esports. But here's my problem, mate. If anyone's been watching LCK this season, I'm so scared for the 3rd and 4th seed from LCK when they go to Worlds, mate. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, it could be anyone. It could be DRX, could be KT, could be even Damwon, by the way, looks fucking ropey at times. Like I feel like Damwon's probably the one that international probably kicks in a gear because their players are experienced. But like, I could see those KT, those DRX, Liv Sandbox. If any of those teams go, Monty, and like 2 of them are probably going, that could be humiliating. That could be a bad one. I can see a world where that goes really badly.
I mean,
Liv Sandbox, please don't let Liv Sandbox go to Worlds.
No,
please.
I want Liv Sandbox to go to Worlds.
I know why you do, but like, it's not going to work, mate. It's not going to work. They're all rookies. They're not going to fall apart.
It's not about it working, Thorin. Okay. It's about it being fun for me. Okay. I want to see Prince and Croco at Worlds.
Okay. Just for some chaos throw out there. Yeah, but they're not going to win the fucking Worlds.
I think they're a fun team to watch. No, I don't think they're going to win anything. But I also think that it would probably be good to have some of these newer players attend Worlds for the first time and get that experience. And I think Liv Sandbox is super fun to watch.
I will say, by the way, if Liv Sandbox gets to Worlds, then like at this point in time, T1 just needs to understand they are Jack Etienne, and whoever they make the fake replacement of Faker, they just sell and he eventually becomes a good player. That's the new fucking business, isn't it? Because the Close going to do it as well. Mate, Monty, we've had like Scout. Like, this is ridiculous. They all go there. All the fucking Easy Hoon, all these cards.
I will say, Thorin, I don't want both Liv Sandbox and KT to make Worlds alongside Gen.G and T1. Like, I would rather have at least one of Damwon Kia or DRX be there purely because I think those teams at least have a higher ceiling to do well in an international competition.
Got the experienced players as well. People you can trust to actually do something. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Here's what's different about the world now, Monty, from when we used to do some of the Insight way back in the day. In theory, back in the day, every team from Korea was supposed to be a potential Worlds winner. That has not been the case for years now, boys. Like the LPL era basically killed that. Now it's the opposite. Now it's like only the best team's probably the one that will do it, you know. Because if you look at these bottom seeds, like the point is, these teams we're talking about, Liv Sandbox, they could lose to Western teams for sure. Like I could see Mad Lions beating Liv Sandbox, mate. Why not?
Yeah, I mean. Definitely.
No reason. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you see that even with Liv Sandbox being 11-5. Like they are clearly, in terms of record, they're 2 matches ahead of Damwon, KT, and DRX. So the thing about Liv Sandbox is that even when they've faltered against bad teams by losing by. I mean, they lost a series to Nongshan, which is like actually unforgivable. But they have been pretty consistent about dumpstering the worst teams in the league. And they have 2-0 DRX, which has been enormously helpful to them. Like when it comes to the mid-table teams, they've 2-0'd KT, they've 2-0 DRX. Like they've kind of convincingly won against some of the mid-table. Although, to be fair, that KT series, KT should have won.
That was questionable.
KT should have won that series this last week. They have a strong early game. Now, whether that's enough to propel them to consistent victories, considering I think against late game teams, they can struggle. And they are one-dimensional as a roster. Like, they're going to win through Prince. That is how they do it. Their Dove in the top lane is quite clearly the weakest link on this roster.
I maybe wouldn't mind if they go to Worlds, if
anybody.
It's like anywhere. A hyper carry ADC better. Then maybe I'll accept that if they go.
Sure. I think Dom1's definitely the team you want to see at Worlds who might be struggling now, because not only for narrative reasons, but because at the very least, this roster is so individually skilled and has such a huge champion pool. Yeah. They have such a huge champion pool and great flexibility in their draft because their players can like flex picks between each other. They definitely have the best chance of adapting to a Worlds meta fluidly out of any of the team. Like if the Worlds meta was a black box, you definitely want to send Dom1 because you're confident that they're going to be able to use the tools in that box to do something. Whereas if the Worlds meta is a black box and you send Liv Sandbox, it's like you could just straight up lose based on the meta from Liv. And there's not much you can do about it. At least even KT would have a better chance of adapting because they have Rascal in the top lane. They win in much the same way that Liv Sandbox does right now, but you can picture a world where KT theoretically could do kind of well in a top carry meta, whereas like if Dove has to do that, it's fucking over.
No. Yeah, that's actually one thing. Let me think about that actually. Because yeah, that's actually the one thing when I think about the Worlds in general for these teams is like, if you look at all these squads, like I'll give you an example. I actually think like the reason I find the KT roster lineup interesting, if people don't know, is obviously KT roster isn't what they once were, which is a team that has all the big names. But what's crazy about the GM job they've done here is most of these names are cast-offs, dude. These are cast-offs that used to be good in other teams or prospects on other teams. They put them all in one team and dude, they've locked out. Like most of them have actually come back around. Like, as you say, look at the way last year ended with Gen.G. No one gave a fuck about Rascal. Dude, he's actually good. Like he's actually had a pretty good sort of like comeback year. Then you look like Cuz obviously once upon a time was considered really good, then he was considered really bad. Like he's been up and down his whole career. Fucking the life one maybe hasn't worked out as well. They're trying to reclaim him as well. Like this is okay. If you're KT, like they've done a half decent job sort of like picking like the right angle on these players. In my opinion, they've got a good set.
They've also overperformed based on the strength of their roster and the fact that they got fucked in the offseason. They got fucked. They were supposed to get Scout in the offseason. I'll just tell you guys straight up, like I have contacts in the Korean press, and they told me that basically the deal was done for Scout to go to KT, classic. And then the rug got pulled by EDG at the last possible second, and so all the dominoes that were supposed to fall for KT, they wanted to spend a lot of money. It was just like they got completely destroyed, which is why they had to pick up Arya.
Mate. That's making me realise, dude, imagine if you had this exact same roster, but with fucking Scout in mid lane. Dude, they'd be one of the contenders. They would.
But it probably wouldn't have even been this roster.
Would be even better.
It probably would have been a better roster, right? Yeah. Because if Scout's on this team, all of a sudden maybe they attract some other talent. Yeah. So with the scramble job that they had to get Arya, who then turned out to kind of be underwhelming, and they've had to put Vikla in instead, who's been stable. But they have lucked out in a way because this roster has done better than I think anticipated, and they've done it on a lower budget. And I think if they can keep aiming, maybe this offseason they can actually get some better, like a better.
They got a good mid laner,
jungler and mid laner
at that point. Yeah,
because Cuz is kind of like
he's whatever. It's all right.
Yeah. But yeah, we could have, the real tragedy, Thorin, is we could have had Scout versus Faker telecom wars this year.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing to say as well is this. I forgot, that was what I was trying to say on the Damwon one, but I forgot the point. What I would say about Damwon is this. If you want to know, because I think this year especially, dude, jungle has been so important this year, because every team that has really good players and the jungler falls to their ear. Look, shit, Damwon's a great example. The second Canyon started having all these dodgy games, mate, that team became like a third as good as they used to be. It was ridiculous. They just dropped right off the face of the earth. Because obviously, if people don't know, he was probably the best player in the whole world as jungle, you know?
Yep. I mean, I think a lot of the Damwon Kia problems continue just to be indecision. Like they're spoiled for a wealth of flexibility that they have with these players. Even Kenyon, like playing Karthus now in the jungle. He's played, I don't know, like 13, 14 different champions, I think, so far this split alone in the jungle. And that versatility can make you very good. It can make you very surprising in the draft. It can make it so other teams don't have experience playing into your win condition, right? But it can make it hard if your team itself isn't good at playing out your own win conditions or having issues in the early game, which has been a lot of Damwon Kia. Well, their early game's been okay. It's really been like some of their mid and late game macro decisions that have been questionable. Like they don't have a strong voice on this team, and they've tried to address this. Like they took out Kellen and put in this other support Bible, who honestly has been popping off. So there's several things that make me somewhat encouraged about the Damwon Kia as it stands right now. This change did allow them to play very competitively with Gen.G in that series. There's something about this Gen.G Damwon Kia matchup, though, that does seem to really it seems to be a good matchup for Damwon Kia. Gen.G struggles against them more than they do most other teams. And I think that's because Damwon Kia can fight them in the early game and they play weird, which Gen.G sometimes seems to have a difficulty adapting to. Now, Damwon Kia also lost 0-2 to Live Sandbox this week. So read into that what you will. But I think overall, the new Bible guy, if you actually listen to the comms, because one thing LCK does very well is give you replays with comms in them. And they integrate it very seamlessly into it without revealing too much information, but giving you a sense of like the player's personality and how things are going in the team and in the game. Bible is talking like nonstop in some of these games. And he seems to be bringing a voice when it comes to shot calling that we've seen Damwon Kia lack a little bit.
What you're saying is it wasn't until Damwon Kia picked up a Bible that they found direction and a purpose in life.
Exactly.
What sort of fucking whack narrative is this? I know.
I mean, he did struggle in the first couple of games versus Live Sandbox, but his Amumu games were fucking insane. Like it just on an individual level, and then also he's willing to take risks. He was making big plays on this Amumu, and then also when you listen to their comms, he's just going 10 miles a minute, just boom, 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 giving out all these directions. So maybe as he becomes more acclimated to this team, we will see better play overall from Damwon.
The thing is, of all the teams, like they're the one that if you look at the players they have, they should be way better than they are now. Like the real problem for me in this split overall, Monty, what stopped the split fully like going supernova and being as cool as it could be, is what we needed was a real three-way battle between T1, Gen.G, and then this Damwon team. If that had probably, obviously we all thought it would happen because of the Nagori move, that would have been amazing. Like a true like A beat, C beats, that would be the fucking shit. Unfortunately, Damwon just hasn't lived up to it. But as you say, there's time to potentially steal a bit of that fucking run into the playoffs.
Look, just like Vitality, if this team comes online, they're just going to be scary. Like there's not really, you're just waiting for everything to click, and they are clearly making roster changes and making moves to facilitate their development and try and fix some of the shot calling issues that they have had so far this year. By bringing this Bible guy into the team, you can see that from watching the games. You can see that, you can hear it from listening to their comms. Will it work? Who knows? But at least they're trying things and they seem to know what the issues are. And bringing out Kellen at least made it a very competitive series against Gen.G, which is exactly what you want. You get another week off now, take this break, and we'll see if they can bounce back. if they win one of their next series, like they have to play the Guangdong Freaks. Like that shouldn't be a very tough match for them. And then the question will be how well they can do against T1. T1 is not going to have much to play for. Remember that at the very end here, it's unlikely because Gen.G will beat Fredit Brion and they should beat KT. It's unlikely that we are going to see T1 being able to play for anything, because even if Gen.G
don't even draft the normal comp,
yeah,
I would imagine it's going to be the off meta comp or something silly.
Exactly.
You know, yeah.
Even if Gen.G, guys, loses to KT, as long as they beat Fredit Brion, which obviously they should do, they are going to be 16-2 to end the season. But the main thing is that the first tiebreaker is game differential, and right now Gen.G has a +9 game differential against T1, which means that even if Gen.G loses 0-2 to KT, T1 cannot take first place, and they also will not be able to drop to second place, or to third place. So, like, what are they playing for here? They're going to be playing for absolutely nothing versus Damwon Kia, which means that Damwon Kia probably has a pretty big advantage in that series.
And the other thing to mention as well is Koreans not only have done, but are notorious for when a game does not matter, they don't want to reveal anything for the next game.
Going to playoffs.
Yeah. So the logic is
before playoffs.
Exactly. They're not going to show you anything secretly on Biffle. So that's why I say it's going to be like either a joke comp with like a weird pick, or you just purposely pick like stuff you're not going to play in playoffs anyway. Who gives a fuck?
Or you just play super standard.
The most boring one, yeah.
You just play the most boring composition ever and just see if you can do a very basic bitch game of League of Legends. So I don't know. Like I think there's very little incentive, most likely, if you follow the logic of how these games should play out, for T1 to play a very serious game against Damwon Kia, which means in turn that Damwon Kia should be able to make playoffs because that game is just not going to be relevant. Meanwhile, KT is going to have, or at least a higher seeding in playoffs. Meanwhile, it's going to be harder for KT because they're going to be playing against Gen.G. Gen.G, it might not matter either. Like I said, if they beat Fredit Brion, we could see KT beat Gen.G, but I think Gen.G, probably for pride reasons, will just play that out. I also think even if Gen.G plays badly against KT, they still win. So
probably. I mean, the Midland matchup alone's heavily in their favor in it, so like that's going to help.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we look at this, Gen.G definitely going to be a favorite for LCK in these playoffs. They are looking really strong right now. Certainly an early Worlds contender alongside some of the LPL teams. T1's not out of that either. Like T1 is still an extremely good team, but Gen.G looks like they're playing on another level at the moment. You want to do a little bit of LCS talk? We're recording this, by the way, guys, before the second day of LCS this week. So we do not actually have the full final results of this week to discuss. So we pretty much just have to kind of talk about what's been going on in day one as well as last week. So we'll keep the conversation rather light. And in fact, I think we'll just focus it on a more philosophical, timeless topic, which is that many of these teams are swapping their rosters very late in the season. We've seen Golden Guardians make some changes. Now Dignitas is running like an experimental roster at the moment, more or less.
What's your angle on this? I've got a bunch of rants, so come on, what's your angle?
Look, I think you got to develop players, and so why not do this? But it's also really going to fuck with the teams that are in the playoffs right now.
As you said, you've nailed it all. So last point we'll go with first. You're messing around with your playoffs when I'm still trying to make I'm trying to go from 5th to 4th in the playoffs. Now, I agree. You've made the point in the past famously with the Cloud9 Spring 2020 team, which is like, just because I smurfed everyone and you still need to win games, that is your fault, technically. It's not mine. Yes. I've won my games. I'm in the. That is true. It's just it will lower the quality of those games. That'll make it feel as a neutral observer, like, well, that's not really why they lost. That team didn't try or whatever, or they threw the game. There's that. And then also the other thing that kills me, Monty, is this. If you notice, one of my biggest pet peeves ever, I've certainly given mutual friend fucking Papa Smithy his fucking licks on this over the years, is don't gaslight me that you are developing a player you will then yourself sell in that off season. You didn't develop him then. You fucking, that's like fattening up a pig and just fucking killing it in it. Like, you're making it like, oh, I should be a member of the family now. Have another apple, Porky. Then, it's getting nice and big now, and he almost won't fit in a tin. I mean, his den, like, mate, because that's the problem with this, right? What they do, Monty, is they all say that. So when Immortals fired Zabatine and that entire team was SOAS and brought in the reserves for fucking summer that year, they said the same thing. Dignitas now has said the same thing, Monty, we're just bringing in all these players to develop them. You're not, because here's the problem. They didn't win the spot. It's not that they were so good that you had to put them in LEC, LCS. And here's what I hate about it, Monty. This reminds me of what Misfits did in Season 9 when the super team failed and they brought in Leader and they brought in all these players, right, to come in and try these spots out. Because what they did is this. People don't, who are the rest of the league, look at that game and go, well, don't judge the player because he's coming late in the split. No, they judge you, by the way, Monty, is not just who you are as a player. So you're coming into a year where everyone's played like 4/5 of the entire season. You're just getting dropped into LCS. And if you shit, by the way, for those like 2 or 3 games, that's going to be your career. No one's picking you up. No one's going, well, maybe they're just going to go, he's garbage. It will actually set you back, in my opinion. In my opinion, here's what happens. To actually develop a player means you put him into the team in good faith for most of the splits. If you just throw the guy in at the end, you're not. You're just like cynically basically telling your team, you failed, fuck you, and I'm just going to waste this guy's time. Like, because the upside, look, dude, this is where people get ruined, where some people come to the LCS like 3 years later and they're like, this guy's good. Why wasn't he in the league before? And you go back on like Gamepedia and you're like, oh, he played 3 games for Dignitas 4 years ago and he didn't do well. Like that, those narratives kill people's careers, dude, and I hate it. I hate that it does it. I've seen it happen too many times. And how many times does the team keep those players they were developing? They don't do that, do they? Come on.
Well, it also puts the new players in a bad situation because they haven't been practicing for these or preparing for these.
You're in the deep
opponents,
end,
right?
You're just in the deep end, exactly.
And
you're playing some team like fighting for their playoff lives, and you're just jumping into LCS for your first game. Come on, man.
Yeah, and you're playing against much harder opponents. You're playing with teammates that you haven't played with before. I mean, you look at Golden Guardians, they're playing with Leader and Prismal now. Like, the question for me for Golden Guardians is, okay, so you traded for River for Dignitas. Why did you trade for River? Oh, because you wanted to make, I can only assume the reason is because you wanted to upgrade at jungle in order to do better in playoffs or to secure a playoff spot because you have a losing record. So if you upgrade your jungler, why at the same time do you put Leader and Prismal, a player who doesn't even play support, in for Ole, your best player? Like, I don't understand why you make these moves.
I mean, at the jungler's better. Can't players all just have a better jungler? Like, what's he done wrong? You know what I mean? Like,
no, I don't understand this. That move in particular is weird to me. Now, Dignitas clearly has given up. I say that even as they somehow managed to beat Immortals, but Immortals draft.
I remember as well, a few years ago as well, obviously Golden Guardians famously in the org that always stress the angle that they're developing talent, aren't they? Oh, you're developing that talent, that fucking Korean jungler River and the fucking Norwegian mid laner Leader. Oh, it's good NA talent you're working with, yeah, you fucks. I love the way at the end they're all just cynical. When there's like a world spot or a playoff spot on the line, everything they all believe, all that fucking great policy just goes out the window, doesn't it? Everyone just presses the emergency button.
That's because, Thorin, here's what you do in terms of PR if you're an LCS team. You say, can we be good? If the answer is, and do we want to spend money? If the answer to those questions is no, then you say, okay, what cheap NA talent can we get? We're the North American team, guy. We're number 1 NA. We love developing NA talent because it's the cheapest and easiest thing you can do. But it's also the most cynical because everybody knows you don't actually want to do that. That was never your goal. And also, all of these teams, as soon as they say that, as soon as a chance comes along, whoop, they're off. They're off the whole NA talent. They're like, oh no, that wasn't.
I'll give you an example.
Even though we actually marketed ourselves that way, it wasn't us at all.
Put it this way, Monty, the best example ever. I'm going to make a prediction for you. CLG, by the way, right now, they're doing it. They're developing the NA talent. They've got a great lineup. They've only got 1 import player. Spoiler, if CLG actually makes good, Monty, and goes to Worlds, here's my prediction. They just buy an import like mid laner. Like, of course they're not going to just stick with this lineup, are they? Everyone's cynical, like, so you can't win either way. Like, when the joke is, even if they're good, you're going to use that as the springboard to get the next import, aren't you?
Of course, because the next step, here's how it happens, guys. The next step is that teams that couldn't actually attract top talent because their results were bad, when they get to Worlds and inevitably Dokla and Palafox get absolutely destroyed by international solo laners, they're going to be like, oh, well, we need to upgrade these if we want to be good on a world stage. And They're right. They're probably right. They're probably right about that.
Yeah.
As much as I like as much as I enjoy the narrative personally that Palafox and Dokla are doing very well, and I enjoy watching CLG's game right now because at least CLG plays to their own identity. Like they're
Yes.
playing this very aggressive
Yes.
style. I like the fact that they're picking early game compositions and then executing on them. That's very rare for an NA team to do. I like the fact that they seem to be well coached. I like the fact that they seem to be that they play to more than the sum of their parts. But there is a limit to doing that at an international level. Like when you hit ruler, when you hit rookie, your butt's going to get blasted. And you're not going to be able to handle having some of these players on your roster if your eventual goal is to iteratively build your team to be better, to be an LCS contender, to get out of groups at Worlds. And I think it'll happen to CLG.
Here's another juicy topic for you, because obviously one of my main things I hate, because people don't know, my entire career has been essentially narrative storytelling and trying to put in context. Everyone still to this day, Monty, every EG win is about Danny. It's all Danny. You would actually think he was like season 5 Forgiven, mate, the way they talk about this guy. Like you would think he was greatest Uzi eye, like a 1v9 game. Like you wouldn't believe the whole team was set up the way they talk about him. But okay, they talk about this Danny guy every time for every win. Am I the only one who's missed this? Everyone is still forcing that narrative that it's about the NA talent of Jojo and Danny. The MVP of the fucking league is probably inspired you idiots.
Yeah.
Its entire style of play sets the whole team up. It's mental, isn't it? I know it's mental.
It's also that Danny is the number 1 fish sharpshooter of all time. My God, that guy has amazing aim at fish in a barrel. It is truly incredible.
All you have to do is get everyone inside that chalk in the Baron pit, and he just can't miss. It's weird.
You give Danny a fucking shotgun. And you put him in front of a barrel full of fish, and by God, those fish are all dead, Thorin. They are all dead.
Dude, every fucking Baron fight is like a shit 80s horror movie, and all the teenagers as a group are running into the woods, and then Michael Myers or someone's just coming so like, duh, duh, duh. And I'm just watching it, and then I'm just watching him walk up to the Baron pit like, what? Because you saw that TSM one, mate. That was fucking ridiculous. That was like pure clown fiesta shit. I know what.
And it's not, again, I have to keep saying this because everybody's like, Danny's good. I do think Danny is
a good player. By the way, he's fitting the team like a motherfucker. He's doing a great job.
Yeah. But so much credit has to be given to the fact that he is set up so well by his team. And that is a credit to Danny, to knowing when he can carry. That is a credit to his coaches for setting him up for success. That is a credit to his teammate for enabling situations where he can absolutely pop off. These are all true things, but it's not that Danny is some sort of god tier AD carry player in the vein of a ruler, right? He's good, but he is not going to be able to dominate at that level. And indeed, he had laning problems that we saw that were very evident in MSI. He was having laning problems with Vulcan last split. That all has improved. That's great. Like, I love seeing Danny as a player get better over time. But the narrative that goes on around this guy when he is just handed on a silver platter, which is what you want, by the way. Everybody should be happy that this thing is happening because it means that the teamwork is working. The team is working. You don't want to have him have to make the 1v5 super plays that he made on Tristana last year. That was an amazing play that he made on Tristana last year. Absolutely. You don't want him to be in that situation where he has to do that. That is a bad sign, guys. So in a way, you like the pentakills that he's getting right now because it shows that EG is a good team. And that they're using him properly and that they're really invested in playing to their strengths. I love all these things about EG. But the narrative is just absolutely killing me, Thor, and I agree. And Inspired is certainly the leading candidate for MVP overall this spring.
I think I would give him my vote.
I mean, I don't even know who else it would be. I don't even know who else would reasonably stand a chance for that. I guess you'd have to pick somebody on 100 Thieves. Maybe it would be Closer, I guess. But I think Inspired is a very clear front runner.
I mean, I know people are probably going to say someday, but he's not better than Inspired. Come on, mate. Come on. That's just picking someone for picking someone in it.
Yeah, so I think LCS still looking very clearly.
And by the way, I know obviously that I'm already scared because since you said, I don't even know who aside from this one guy we'd pick. It's already like every fucking person in LCS is just trying to find a way to fucking pick Bjergsen or something like, mate. He should have that nickname. Dandy used to have the fucking Prince of Thieves because this motherfucker's stealing paychecks like a mother. This is insane. This guy just stealing millions. They could make a whole movie. It'd be a great movie. It's a heist movie. It's about a guy tricks Steve Arnett and they'll make him in the middle, and he just gets away with millions at the end. He gets away scot free.
They did win a very clean game against FlyQuest yesterday, but that's what you expect from this team. Again,
that's how far they've dropped Monty. Wow, they had a clean game against FlyQuest. Like, it seemed like it's one of the most expensive rosters ever made. What's the standard?
Yeah, exactly. I think people, speaking of narratives, the narrative that should be persisting around Team Liquid is that they are a massive disappointment. Meanwhile, now we're just like, oh, they played a really dominant game against FlyQuest. Like, oh, good for Team Liquid. Like, the fact that Team Liquid is not in first place in this league and smashing everybody and contending for a 1 or 2 loss split, which is the only reasonable expectation you can have of this group of players. But apparently we just have to sit here and pretend that JoJo and Danny are the sole carries of evil geniuses. Meanwhile, we're having a party every time Team Liquid beats a team that's has a 50% win rate. Sad. Very sad state of affairs. I will say, at least for Team Liquid's sake, that they do seem that they may be able to make worlds, considering that Cloud9 still doesn't have their shit together, and CLG should not be able to stand up to them in a high stakes playoff match with the caliber of players that are on Team Liquid's roster.
Here's a stat and a half for you. This stat alone tells you all you need to know. Dude, I think the longest win streak TL had was at the beginning of the split. It was 3 games. I don't think they've managed to string together more than 3 BO1s in a row in LCS. What?
Yeah.
What's going on, boys? Holy moly.
Yeah, not good. All right, I'm done with LCS now. Should we take some viewer questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, as usual, Grogcoin, go to the Insight on Esports Discord. There'll be a pinned message in the Grogcoin Lounge. If you have 25, then you can ask questions. So we're going to go to questions.
Spoiler, if your question involves a 3rd paragraph, probably too long a question already. I'm just going to say that. After that last week, that fucking weird one last week, like, don't make it too long.
It was too long. Any favorite philosophers and why? P.S. Shout out to Thorin for a Spinoza reference. That was good. The ethics is not
if you knew that one.
Easy read. That was funny. I don't know if I have favorite philosophers. Nishi, maybe. I'm not sure favorite and philosopher go together. I more just find them intriguing in individual ways and interesting. I don't know if I have like a philosophical preference. I guess I like Marcus Aurelius as well.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to say. Like, I can't really go wrong with Marcus Aurelius, but like, all that shit. Like, basically, I'll tell everyone what I actually think. I actually just think that's fake, and it wasn't written at the time it was written. Monty, it's too good, and the way it's written it's way too modern in my opinion. The way it's written, so like, I think it was some shit written later. But spoiler, I'm essentially saying it's too good to be from that era. Like that's it. Because the problem is that is like the ultimate self-help book. If you ever read that meditation, it's too good, mate. It's too good. And also, I just don't know if a real emperor would be able to have that sort of like down to earth view on. Like, I don't know. It's a bit like a lot of the shit where, if you don't know this, if you ever look up like Lao Tzu and stuff, supposedly the premise goes, because of how long ago it was, over time, if people edit these shit and make it a bit better, or they add in a bit of their own stuff, or they make it a better point, because by the time they come to us thousands of years later, they're too good, mate. They're too refined, everything they said, you know.
Yeah, and also, you never know what was changed later, like you say. And most of the Gospels in the Bible were written hundreds of years after.
I think
Jesus
they claim like 50 or 70 years or something. But yeah,
it depends on the gospel.
Yeah.
It depends on the gospel. Some of them were like several
There's
hundred,
definitely
like
a lot of
hundred
skepticism
years
about the authenticity of the
No,
yeah, exactly.
that was probably pretty heavily edited.
And spoiler, if you don't know, probably the stupidest part about the Gospels, which by the way I do think have a lot of value as like philosophical texts, etc., even morally. Probably the stupidest thing about the Gospels is they're claiming to be 4 eyewitness reports, and they just directly contradict each other on like major points of the story. And we're like, we obviously were there, or someone's lying, someone's having a lie, and so yeah, that part does fucking. Anyway, I would say like Marcus Aurelius is a classic one. Nietzsche's a good one as well. The problem with saying Nietzsche's your favorite is there's just too much in there. He's got fucking volumes and volumes of that shit. So I don't know about that. Like, let me think who else I maybe would put in the mix.
The thing that I find interesting about Nietzsche is that he's also a subversive artist at the same time, which is unique among most philosophers.
Who else would I pick for this? Maybe I don't really know if I have someone else I could pick for this one. Because the other problem I do think as well is you have to realize philosophy is just what we call either modern day thinking about these topics or the ancient Greeks. Like the rest of it was just religion, wasn't it? Like it wasn't called philosophy at the times. So the problem is, like, for example, there are loads of like Christian apologetics, I think, like St. Augustine and stuff. Like when people say that line, by the way, that like every actual debate and argument that you can have against Christianity was answered by St. Augustine, something like 1700 years ago, something like. It's true. If you go and look it up, he actually addressed all of them. And again, by the way, he's also just way too good again. He's addressing it like he was like fucking 50 years ago. Like he's just nailing it. It's just like an FAQ. Like, well, next up from viewers. Oh, sorry, yeah, ancient. You know, like, come on, man. So he's a pretty good one. He's got some bangers. He's got some fucking bangers for sure.
What do you think? Why do you think we haven't seen theme comps in a long time, with the exception of poke comps like 5 global ults? Okay. Faker's mid-ye with 4 enchanters, 5 AoE crowd control ultimates.
More like gimmick comps, he means.
I mean, we do see some of the AoE crowd control ultimate comps, you know. Those are starting to make a comeback, like Callista, Amumu, Sejuani, like Wukong comps. Like those exist for sure.
I mean, I will say, Monty, I did personally find it really cool that T1 did bring back the pick comp as like a regular thing.
Yeah.
That was like your era when you were there. That was the thing in League of Legends. Like that just went away for years, didn't it?
Here's the actual answer.
And I also do love, by the way, just like you, I also do love like when people can execute a really difficult poke comp, because what I always love is this. To a noob, it's like easy, they're overpowered. It's like, mate, we're dancing on a fucking tightrope. If we go in too fast, we all die. Like poke comps are also super fascinating to watch.
I think the answer is this. The problem is that Riot developed a bunch of champions that can do everything, like Vex. Okay, Vex has an AoE CC, but she can also engage on you from like half the map away. So you can play her as an AoE crowd control champ, or you can play her as a pick champion in different compositions. So I think that really there's just so many more different ways to execute on current champion kits than there used to be, that it's not so one-dimensional. It's more about how teams use the tools that they have. And a Vex could be used differently and be used very differently in 2 different kinds of compositions, or even differently within the same game, right? Like Zeri can poke champions, but she can also be a high mobility, like AD cleanup hyper carry. It's just that they've made champions that have way better, like more versatile kits. Previously, Thorin made an analogy using Japanese visual novels to imply something is shit. Indeed, most visual novels are poorly written and merely exist for wish fulfillments and weebs to fap to. That's true.
I already know what's coming now, because here's the problem, guys. Since I made the terrible mistake of ever criticizing anime, we will now have hundreds of questions over the next for every anime and manga defender. We'll give me the next. What's the next party? I know there's a bot coming in.
That is true.
But has he read?
No.
Hit me with it.
No, but that is true. Like most of like the shonen manga and stuff like that are basically just like teenage wish fulfillment.
They're literally 13-year-olds, yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all this.
Here's what people don't get, Monty. I'm going to have to explain this one point if people really don't get this. If you only know Japanese culture through manga and anime, understand this, because you're going to think I'm exaggerating. If you went to Japan, and let's say you're 23, I'm assuming you're not all like 15-year-old kids. Say you're 23, and you go to Japan, and you're like, this is brilliant. I'm in the mecca of all that shit. No 23-year-old guy is going to know what the fuck you are talking about. They don't read 12-year-old fucking shonen mangas. In fact, the normal guys, no joke, are going to look at you like you're a fucking pervert. Like they're going to be like, you're into that. I'm not joking. That when they say otaku to you in Japan, they do it with disdain, dude. It's not a well-loved thing. I've always said this. A lot of that is just Western teenagers who are lost. Instead of becoming a goth, they just become a fucking weeb now, man. That's like the new shit, isn't it?
So, and it's also the same. It's the same playbook, no matter what kind of young adult novel or medium you go to. It's super easy to write young adult literature because you do this. Wait for it. Okay. So what you do is you're like, okay, I have teenage characters and they are going to be chosen to do something and go on some sort of epic adventure. And they are going to have very stock standard personalities that we're going to group into different. In Harry Potter, it's like houses at Hogwarts. And these people have these personality characteristics so that everybody can identify with some sort of external group that is stripping down personality traits to their barest essentials, because teenagers don't have personalities. They are trying to find their personality. So they want to identify with something outside of them instead of the other way around, right? Which is coming into your own as a human being.
The Letterman character is sort of like a rich kid who has natural skill and was given everything, but he hasn't really sort of adjusted and he doesn't try that hard. But then you won't believe this, Monty. He's battling the young, plucky kid who's coming from the working class, who everyone tried to hold down, but he fought with the fucking senses, and now it's all the same fucking plots in it. I know
it's like in Naruto, it's like which like ninja clan are you? And like in Avatar, it's like which nation do you come from, the Fire Nation, or are you? It's like it's the same shit every single time. Every time. Exhausting. So anyway, to continue this question, however, what if the developers of visual novels adapt classic literature with the usual pictures, voice acting, and background? Wouldn't this be a great training wheel for novice readers? No.
By the way, the guy who asked this question, I assume, is the guy complaining in chat. This is not a jukebox, dickhead. Just because you asked the question, I don't have to answer it your way. I answer it the way I want. I'll stop the answer now if I want. So you can fuck off already with that attitude. Like, that's how you never get another answer question again, because you can revert to not being on the fucking show.
Okay.
So let's go back to the point. So the question was, if you made them into what?
If you made classic literature into visual novels, which has been done, at least it's been done into manga.
Didn't they do like a Count of MonteCristo anime or something? I think they did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Because they've done a few of them. I think they did a Sherlock Holmes one. If people don't know,
honestly, Thorin, the irony of the Count of MonteCristo anime is it's probably the best version of the Count of MonteCristo that's ever been filmed. Not because it's not because it's super good in and of itself, but because all of the other versions are so garbage, because they're either movies where you can't contain a 1,200 page book, or because they change really fundamental. They try and make it like a happy ending, which is just so weird. Whereas Gankutsuo, which is the Count of Montecristo anime, is strange, and he is a space vampire, but in many ways it's actually more true. Yeah, he is a space vampire. It is in many ways more true to the actual themes of the Count of Montecristo. And I've seen like the Gerard Depardieu like French miniseries, and they're all bad. They try and reconcile like Mercedes and the Count at the end, which the whole point is that he's not actually in love with her anymore. Yes. And in fact, he's incapable of love in many ways. Like he kind of destroys himself. So in a way, the anime is actually the best filmed version of the Count of Montecristo I have seen. It's called Gankutsuo. It's not bad. It's not good, but it's not bad. So yeah, I do think it can be, to answer the question, you are going to lose a lot of the nuance if you try and turn it into a visual novel, because there are certain tropes of the medium. Could it be a good way to get more people into literature? I don't know. I never needed that. I never needed visual novels to get me into literature.
I mean, all I'll say is this. I said it on a few weeks ago when it was the question about like comic books that get adapted. I don't think that's what happens. I would disagree with even the premise of the end mechanism there. That if someone essentially, if someone watches the MonteCristo anime, will they then go, hey, maybe I'll check out some literature? No, they won't. Fuck off. They'll just watch another anime, you dumb fuck. If anything, they'll go, I don't need to. There's an anime of it. Didn't know he was a vampire though. Should have told me it's sick. So like the joke is just like the joke is all of you that are now like, I think The Boys is good. You'll never read that comic in your life. I'll bet it now. Dollars to donuts. Come back in 5 years. Did you read it? Of course you didn't, because you watched the TV show. So spoiler, I think it goes the other way.
You accuse me of that. I've already started reading The Boys.
No, I meant that more like the royal you, Monty. I'm talking to the audience when I say that. You actually have read some stuff, so I could believe you could. The point is, I know they won't for that reason, you know.
I do have a degree in reading some stuff, as they say. Do you think Korean and Mexican cultures have similarities? When you talked about Korean corruption regarding the new KESPA rules, you could have easily been talking about Mexico. I don't know enough about Mexican.
I know all about Mexico.
I mean, I don't know enough about Mexican corruption. Let's put it that way. Cartelism, spicy food. I think Korean and Mexican food are extremely similar to each other.
Oh, I'll say, put it this way. I think maybe he's connecting it because obviously I described like the chaebols are like cartels. Yes. Maybe he's mean, there is a bit of that, but that's also spoiler. That's actually how most of the world ran before all these fake Western democracies. Obviously Italy was all royal, all fucking houses and fucking power brokers. Of course, that's how all countries ran, to be fair.
I think the difference, though, is that Korean corruption is based off of cronyism, where it's everybody just glad-handing each other and like exploiting each other under the table, or giving their buddy who they were in the Korean military with like a handout. And there's never any kind of violence, or there's no crime. Well, there is crime. It's financial crime, right? It's not murder crime. in my experience with Mexican culture, and I say this as somebody who really enjoys being in Mexico, like I fucking love Mexican food. I love being in Mexico. I really enjoy Mexico City. Um, Mexicans are much more individualistic, whereas Koreans are much more collectivistic. And so it seems much more, I would say, like lone wolf out for yourself in Mexico. Whereas Korean, there's a very, very strong sense of the community and not harming the overall community. So I don't know. I don't think so. But the food is very similar, which is why it's so easy to create Mexican Korean fusion cuisine, because it's basically all based around chilies and marinated meats. And in Korean food, the carbohydrate is rice. And then in Mexico, it's corn and tortillas, right? So you basically have spicy marinated meat with some carbohydrate, and they're very similar in that way. Yeah, I love both foods, both top tier, in my opinion. Why does Riot insist on inviting minor region teams to a format which is increasingly a Polish corridor? I don't know, or Polish corridor. I don't know that phrase, or if it was a mistype. Instead of just reviving the wildcard tournament. I would revive the wildcard tournament. I don't see minor region teams being invited as a big plus to the world's main event.
So wait a minute. There's some saying like a Polish
corridor.
I'm trying to see
I think this is an auto. I think this is the Polish corridor was the issue, or at least the apparent pretext over which World War II began. How do I not know this?
Oh, wait, it says here.
Polish corridor, okay, I get it. Listen, yeah.
It says it was a strip of German territory awarded to the newly independent Poland by the Treaty of Versailles. So essentially what he's saying is that they're just given a spot in Worlds, essentially, instead of like qualifying.
Yes.
Like, obviously, Vietnam just gets a slot. I think that's what he means. It's sort of like, it's just right. They just essentially arbitrarily get given a spot, don't they?
Yeah, it was to give access to the Baltic Sea. I see. Okay. Yeah, I understand. So
why does Riot do it essentially when the teams can't compete? Sort of, is that the premise?
Yeah, I think that's it.
To me, this just comes back to if I had to say the number one problem I think Riot Games has had in the history of their esports involvement, it is doing things that they think theoretically are right, but that in the real world, the reality is not the case and is often the opposite. So obviously the reason why they have done this, and I'll even say, Monty, I'm going to tie it into this analogy every time I can for the next few months. In Valorant, they're actually right, Monty. In Valorant, believe it or not, by some weird happenstance, most of the major regions can compete and potentially maybe even win or be like a threat to win. So in Valorant, they're actually correct. That is a good format to have where the whole world gets slots and you only have a go. The problem they have in League is, listen, anyone with an eye test and who had any history of esports knew you would never have Brazil compete with Korea. That's a pathetic notion that you even think it's possible. In fact, I would even say, if you think even 10 years of developing CB LOL's ever going to make Brazil compete with Korea, I think you're a fool and you don't know anything about why Korea's on top and why Brazilian League of Legends suffered. So I do think essentially their idea was, if you keep, essentially, Monty, they were doing the shit Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If we just keep giving slots to all these minor regions, eventually they'll be really good. And that's never happened. Like, some minor regions have been all right. Like, we've had DFM do stuff from Japan and VCS have done stuff, obviously. The problem is they're never actually going to be competitors. So if you bring it back to the original thing, that's what's weird about it. On the one hand, you are like boosting these teams. You get them to go to the World Championship. They get to look good. On the other hand, you are also making them look a bit silly. Like, they get to look shit. Like, I have to say, the reason Worlds is always underwhelming to me, as I've always said, is at the end of every Worlds, I always just think, imagine if the 6th LPL team would be there instead of this fucking squad that I don't care about, So, like, it is a weird approach. Because essentially, I think they're going to, that's another thing. I think they will always stick with this approach, Monty. I think this whole United Colours of Benetton approach will always be the Riot way.
Yep.
Just seems to be what they're into in it.
Well, it's because it's most profitable for them, because they can feed delusions and grow local scenes so that they continue to just fool people into thinking they're competitive, and they think that growing those local scenes is more profitable than having a better tournament. That's it.
That was actually a take you had. People could go back in time to the first Summit and Insight in 2014. That was actually a take Monty had right at the beginning of us doing the show, which was that the whole reason Riot did that is actually for what you're talking about. Because they know, for example, LCS can't compete consistently with LCK, they have to keep them apart as much as they can. Otherwise, you could never believe the delusion. Like, everyone makes fun of LCS fans. If you had an open circuit in TSM from 2012 onwards, just went 0 and 50 Ryan's career, there wouldn't even be the most delusional TSM fan would think they could win Worlds. But I tell you what, if you separate them and then they look dominant in LCS, every time at least part of you thinks, well, I've got to at least give them the benefit of the doubt, right? But the reality isn't that, of course. No, instead, because that's what's funny, Monty. Now everyone's realised it. They're all mad. They don't realise it worked for Riot. Dude, they got like a solid 4 or 5 years off before people really realised on Reddit, like, wait a minute, these tournaments are all whack and there's not enough of them and they can't compete. It took people years. In games like CS4, boys, if you're reaching shit, you're going to get found out in 6 months. Forget like 5 years. You find out very quickly that you have no hope, you know.
We've heard Thorin break down the debates between esports GOAT candidates in a number of areas, but with Richard closing the esports chapter of his life, it's time for the GOAT debate. Can you both please break down the GOAT esports journalist candidates for Thorin and Richard and tell us, as of now, who has the strongest claim? So we're talking about whether you or Richard are the esports GOAT journalist. I think that's really hard. Both of you guys have extremely long careers, but you have different focuses. Richard has been more of an investigative journalist and host, and Thorin has been more of a mass content creator and historian and desk analyst. So
interviewer.
Yeah. I think it's very different. Like you have had both extremely different careers.
Yeah, that's the main problem I have with this. Is like the joke is this. The reason no one considers me a journalist is because they don't know what journalism is. So they think what Richard does is all that journalism is. What they don't know is, if you actually look at our careers, it shows you what an incredible breadth you have in journalism. There are so many types. And then think even the games we work in. Richard doesn't do League of Legends talk shows like I do, but he does stuff in other games. So we've also just had, in fact, what people don't realize is, we already do what we want to do anyway. But I would say once we sort of realised that we each had specialty, we just didn't feel like, for example, I've told this story before. I've sent do you know how many fucking free layups I've had, Monty, of information that I could have reported about League of Legends or roster? I just give them all to Richard because why would I care? I'm getting all my views and hits anyway, boys. And I don't want to run those stories down. So if I ever had those, I was just sent Richard's where I just said, you'll deal with this if it's a good story. Someone's got a fucking angle. So I would say we have intentionally not competed in that regard, you know.
Well, it's more that I think Richard does more like the hard journalism and you do more of the soft narrative journalism stuff or like contextually based stuff. It's just very different. I don't know if there's anybody has the strongest claim to the throne because it's really difficult to compare you to.
And we have, through our different interests, by going in those angles, always covered different areas. Like I'll give you an example. It's something actually Richard appreciated, I know. Obviously, Richard's whole take, because he's a working class guy and he came from the bottom of the industry, he's always been all about the players. Like he sees the players and he's like, if I ever see anyone, because they're young, they're impressionable, they can get exploited, they don't know about law, etc. He's always generally a player advocate. Whereas if you notice, because everyone who's a journalist by default takes that position of like the little guy, if I ever see that the big guys like the team orgs get fucked, I decided, right, someone has to be an advocate for these guys. So if you notice, that's part of why I did the Flashpoint project. I've tried to look into the areas that other people in the industry get fucked in. So you want it to all be exposed. You want to see the problems in all the areas, in my opinion, you know. We're not going to answer that question. You'll have to pick your
I think it's just a preference question, honestly. As to what it's a value question as to what kind of journalism you value more would be my response. And I don't.
Obviously, the real answer is Jacob Wolf because none of you know what the fuck you're talking about. So, not that he wouldn't win it, by the way, but he just shouldn't even be in the conversation yet. He's got put another 5 years in, mate.
Yeah, sure. What type of questions do you hate? Do you feel you have a more antagonistic banter relationship with your fans/viewers, or do you truly hold disdain for everyone who watches you? I don't hold disdain for people who watch us. In fact, I think our fans are mostly pretty good because our fans tend to be like 25 plus, like more mature. I don't have problems with most questions. I'm happy to answer them for you guys. Like if it's something we've talked about a million times before, or you guys are going to get really like off the deep end in terms of weird fringe philosophic scenarios, then I kind of get annoyed. But I like the banter, you know, as long as people come and have something witty to say. I have a sense of humor about myself. Like I know what my strengths and weaknesses are and my own biases. So you guys can have fun making funny comments about me and I'll probably laugh and respond. Not a big deal. Like I can't.
This is one of those that go on.
I can't take myself too seriously. I talk about fucking video games for a living and blow a train whistle in a conductor outfit. Like clearly I don't take myself that seriously. I like dressing up in like funny costumes and doing skits. Okay.
This is one of those classic fan angles that I fucking despise. So spoiler, the answer is just you. Just you and people like you I don't like. All the others are cool. Because what I hate, shit fans always do this, Monty. They conflate themselves, a random delusional fuck up with all the normal fans that don't do anything and don't say anything mean and just sit there and enjoy the content, upvoted and go, good job, happy birthday. Like, and then some shitter like this comes in, Monty. What they do is this. They act like when they run in the room and go, blah, 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 shit, and squirt diarrhea everywhere, that if you throw that one fan out, you go, ha, fans are the only reason you have a job, man. Without fans, where would you be? Well, I'll tell you what, mate. If we throw the one person diarrheaing everywhere, it'll actually be better for everyone else in the room. Spoiler, we can keep all the other people in the room, just not you. So that's the problem I have, is I get annoyed with the worst fans, because here's my problem. I think most of our fans are brilliant, because they seem to view this show, Monty, like I consume content. They just watch it as entertainment. It's something interesting. Yep. They think something in their brain. They maybe say, good show, and they go on with their life. The ones I don't like are the people who, cause in their life, this is the key thing I've learned from observing them. They're people where none of their friends would have this conversation with them. They're such annoying, obnoxious people. No one in their mum doesn't want to hear what they think about the draft of Team Liquid. Their friend, even in League, doesn't give a fuck about their thoughts about whether Reckless is better than Upset. So what they do instead is, because we give our thoughts and they're in a parasocial relationship watching this YouTube video, thinking their reply thoughts, they have to come to us and try and like force their opinions down our throat and be like, well, don't you really think that though? If Upset was really that good, wouldn't he already have made playoffs like Reckless didn't see? Then just do that. Guess what? That is just obnoxious, no matter what your opinion is. In fact, I'd even say this. I shouldn't do this because I actually don't want these people to fix their shit. I like it when you're obnoxious and you give a real opinion, because I love to block obnoxious people. I don't like people just coming in my face all the time. And by the way, before they go, you can dish it out but can't take it. One, you're crying about blocks. You obviously can't take it. And two, in no way do I go and contact you personally and send my message to you. I put it on YouTube and you choose to click the video, you fuck. Do you know how consent works? I'm not rubbing that down your throat at all. Meanwhile, you are sending your message directly to me, and it's always like that, Monty. It's like I say about the questions. You know, it's the best questions are open-ended. When the question starts like this, don't you think, though, Monty and Thorin, that Gen.G actually will lose to T1 because they're sort of like the choker? It's like, you're just giving us your thoughts. Like, you're pretending you're asking us a question, but really saying, please agree with me. Those are the ones I don't like. Just because, if you notice on shows, I like people who have their own take. So just make it more open-ended and there won't be any problem with those questions. You can't do that, of course.
I mean, that question was also open-ended, so.
Yeah, no problem with that.
Is the willingness of LPL to bench historically great players when they are performing, i.e. Karsa, Doggo, etc., net good or bad for the league? Good. At least they have threats of people on the bench, right? That's what other leagues lack, is that they can't actually motivate star players who are slumping. And guys, you wouldn't believe half the reasons that star players slump in teams. Oftentimes, it's because they're having like personal issues, or they got a new girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is, right? And they're not focusing on the game, or they're having some stupid fight with their teammate. And oftentimes, because of how much they're paid and because there is no threat of replacement, they just won't fix these problems, or they won't be motivated themselves. So I think it's actually extremely good that LPL has the power and the depth in order to actually deal with their star players appropriately and put them on the bench when they're not motivated.
Yeah, the problem here is, just like every other discussion in League, people are going to strip all the context out and just make a one-for-one and go, see, LCS should do that. No, LCS shouldn't bench Jensen, because the problem is, whoever's coming in, it's like, it's some Parler Fox guy. It isn't Jensen, is it? You're never getting a Jensen. You're just going to get, if he plays badly, you might get a guy who can slightly go above that level. Here's the difference, and if I give you this one example, it will show you why the LPL has an absurd luxury of talent that no one in the West can match. Dude, the move is this. The top team right now in LPL, if people don't know, is Top Esports. Obviously, of Knight and fucking Jackie Love. But here's the thing. This year, there was supposed to be a super team, Monty, because this year they had Zoom as their top laner. And he was called, for the last 2 years, best top laner in the world. Now, spoiler, Zoom barely even played for Top Esports and doesn't play for them now. They actually booted him because he was doing so badly, and they replaced him with Wayward, a challenger player from their org, who hasn't got like some super fame. And he's been really good, and they're the best team in the league. You can't do that in the West. That would be, guys, like if when Cloud9 benched Jensen in Season 8, they just never brought him back and Golden Glue just won LCS. Like, that would be absurd. That's what the LPL's like, though. So the point is, when you have that crazy talent pipeline, you can actually, like, essentially pressure the stars and make sure they actually do what they should do and play to the level, listen to the coach. Like, I actually respect that a lot about the Asian regions, that they will be so ruthless in benching people. Same with Korea. I think, like, a lot of times I would think it was the wrong move coming from the West, but then I'd have to realize I don't know how good that guy is who's on the bench. So maybe, like, you turn out, like, you remember a classic example back in the day was fucking Peekaboo. That guy was just sat on a bench doing nothing, and then they put him in and he was, no joke, like one of the best supports in the whole league. And you were like, how is he on a bench? That's their regions. In our regions, we're not like that, guys. We haven't got that many hidden gems. You couldn't replace these players. They have an ego, unfortunately, for sort of a justified reason. Like I'll give you an example. That Humanoid discussion earlier, mate. Humanoid wouldn't let Humanoid in like this in LCK for a split in half. Like he'd have been on the bench ages ago. But the problem is in Europe, who are you putting in instead from an ERL? Some nobody. No way. You're just going to stick with Humanoid and hope he turns the corner, aren't you?
It's okay though. Jenkins #1 Gangplank world.
Jenkins. It's the fact he's called Jenkins as well. Like, you got to have a better name than that.
He was really good. He couldn't even survive being on CLG for an entire year. Anyway, you are tasked with creating an all-star scouting team. Who would you get to scout for talent at each region? I mean, Peter Dunn's obviously done a bang-up job. Historically, Team MVP and Coach Choi have done an amazing job in Korea. MVP probably has the best scouting history of any org in the world ever, in numerous games over the years.
LS is obviously a good one, because he knows all the screen solo queue. Veteran in Europe was always a pretty good one for ERL players. Although I will say, here's the asterisk you need to know with Veteran. You need to know if that player's a friend of his or not. If it's a friend of his, then magically, just like Selfie with LS, they get put in that different nepotistic circle where magically they don't get ripped apart in every VOD and destroyed. Like somehow they just skate by, and that's weird how that works. So Veteran's a good one for Europe. I mean, if you want another NA one, as far as I know, I think wasn't it supposed to be Empire from EG who actually scouted George or Danny, one of the two, right? Maybe Danny, I think it was.
Sure, yeah.
So I think there's a few. The point is, they're not many of them. They're thin on the ground, but the people who do it are amazing. There are some fucking banger people at recruiting.
Honestly, answer to this too is Alicus, who used to work for me on Renegades and also worked for Misfits. He has long been one of the best talent scouts. He created the roster that was like Cadril, Alfari, and Han Sama for Renegades in Europe that immediately qualified for LCS that Misfits bought. And then he also scouted very well in Overwatch also. So he is very good. If you were the king, this is a funny question. If you are the king of Westeros, who would be your hand, crown guard, master of coin, and spy master of the following people?
Oh, it's going to be esports people, right? Wait, let me write a list down because I need all the roles here. So what am I doing here? Hand,
Hold
spy
on,
master.
I'll type it to you.
Just type it for me. Yeah, go on. How many roles are there? Like 4 or 5?
It's very funny.
Right, okay,
out of the following people, Loco, LS, Veteran, and Fresco.
Right, okay, let's do this. Let's figure it out. Okay.
This one
so
is
remember,
funny.
So we've got 4 roles.
All right, I've got my answer.
People.
I've got my answer. Okay, so here we go. My crown guard is Froskurin because she's so good at policing other people.
That's pretty good angle. That was actually a pretty good angle. I'll give you that one. Plus, to be fair, obviously in Westeros they were all men, but there could be like Dune. She could be like a fish speaker type character. That'd be right up her alley. Go on.
My master of coin is LS because he is very tight. I know when LS has a lot of money, he is very frugal.
Okay.
And he's very protective of money overall.
See, that's where we're different because I was going to do the opposite. I was going to say I wouldn't pick him for that, but just because he wasted all those money buying like Black Lotuses and shit. But I know in his world, you think it's like a real investment.
That he actually did make a lot of money from investing in that Black Lotus. It's grown significantly since.
Wait till he sells it then. Let me know when he sells it.
He's not going to sell it. Let me see here. Oh man.
So we've only got 2 roles left. We've got the hand.
I want
and the...
Loco Doco as my hand.
Let's be real, Monty. Loco probably has to be the fucking hand. He can't be the spy master.
He can't be the spy master.
Secrets, isn't he? He's like double if he can't keep a secret.
Yeah, it has to be Loco Doco as my hand. At least I know Loco Doco is undyingly loyal. Even if he is having a bad time, I know he's not going to like betray me from the hand position.
Yes.
Whereas, and Veteran at least is organized, and he actually does a lot of like on the ground work. It seems like Veteran would probably be pretty good at managing a spy network if you gave him that.
Yeah, he could fit that.
Okay, I think that's my answer.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good set. The problem is it's hard to have any other order, isn't it? Like, for example, I'm obviously not going to pick fucking Veteran or Frosco as my hand. I'm me, and I don't like those people. So, spoiler, I'm not going to have the... Why would I pick someone who betrayed me publicly as my hand of the king? Like, just sounds like a good way to get fucking killed there, doesn't it? So, like, I think those are pretty good in general. It's pretty good. I mean, obviously the joke is I'll go with a different angle on it. Okay, I'll go with, obviously I'll take Frost scoring for Master of Coin, because as we found out by her coming back to work for LOL Esports, money is obviously the most important thing in the world, including other people's lives and freedoms and everything. So Master of Coin, in fact, in some ways, the problem she has, Monty, is the coin's mastered her, hasn't it? So that's her problem. So there's Frost scoring. Then I'll do... Let me think. What should I do for the other one? IQ, I'll have to take Loco Doco as my hand, because all he's good for, Loco, is to just be the loyal follower. Like, if people don't get this might seem weird. They might be like, but how could he be loyal? Didn't he betray you and Monty? No, because at the time, that was actually him showing undue loyalty to Reginald, if you understand that. The point is now, we're the Reginald. See that? We're the Reginald now. So now we'd have him on our side. He'd do whatever we say now. That's all good. So then there's only one role left, which is Spy Master that I'm putting... Who am I putting in that
Crown
one,
Guard and Spy Master. It's LS.
I mean, what the joke is, I'll put Crown Guard Veteran, because obviously, again, if just like in Game of Thrones, if they pay him enough money, he'll just turn on me, won't he? So, but the difference is I know that, so I'll already do the double. Exactly, you see. I'll be ahead of the game, exactly. I'll be like all your visual novels where you think it's great writing, because at the end, he actually, just like Peaky Blinders, spoiler, always gets away with everything by always slightly knowing one extra thing that they didn't, and in one scene that they didn't show you on camera, doing one thing that sets it up so you can beat everyone. So even when your whole thing's like, you didn't know this guy betrayed you, he's like, I didn't, but I did, so I already set it up and he killed you. Like, that's what it'd be like in it. Some garbage where you're all fucking, basically Code Geass season 1 if you've never seen it.
I haven't.
Don't worry about it.
Some teams have shown success this year by boot camping at unorthodox time, G2 during Worlds, XL during MSI. However, League is already known for a full calendar, which causes burnout in players. If you were in charge of a team's practice schedule for a year, when would you boot camp to optimize success? I mean, you can basically only do it during MSI and after Worlds. That's the only, and during
part
Worlds.
of the problem is you've got to have other teams to practice there. It's not just you, is it? So they've got the other teams sort of boot camping at the same time, right?
And the thing is, you don't want to like come to NA to boot camp, because the solo queue is going to be, I mean, the solo queue will be better while the Worlds teams are here, so maybe you do, but ideally what you want to do is boot camp during and after Worlds. But the other problem is that if you boot camp during and after Worlds, then you may not have your roster completed, because that doesn't happen until after Worlds a lot of time with free agency. And then also, Riot makes such big changes that honestly, I don't think boot camping during Worlds is super good. I think you have to boot camp after the Worlds patch hits, so you're actually playing on the meta for that year. And then I think during MSI is an excellent time. It's an excellent time, as long as it's in Asia. If it's in NA, it's garbage. You just have to go to Korea and then boot camp over there away from all the teams. But honestly, there are always enough Asian teams willing to practice that you shouldn't have an issue getting good scrims.
As long as you have the right hookup, you've got to have someone who obviously knows them and can get the fucking hierarchy up. But yeah, sure. By the way, low key, that actually should be a new real position to be considered to be hired. I would hire, no joke, I would hire some like LPL mainstay just to help me get the fucking boot camp when I go there. It's actually worth the weight in gold, those guys.
It's a weird question.
Dodgy, come on.
Tips on handling international video or audio calls with medium to high latency. There's no, those are miserable.
There aren't any.
Yeah, there aren't any. What is your favorite biography?
Ooh, okay. I've read a lot of biographies, so let me think. What would I pick for that? Ooh, let me think. Like, I'm trying to think already of what the candidates would be. Like the Steve Jobs one is a very good one. I think, who was the guy who wrote that? I'll try and find the names for these if I can. That was written by Walter Isaacson. That was pretty good. Because on that one, the key thing was supposedly Steve Jobs at the end of his life went to this guy and told him, "I want you to sort of write like a real biography, and I'm going to give you full access to all the people in my life, but you actually have to write it like how you think." And so basically, even though you had full access to like all of Steve Jobs' relatives, he actually like criticizes them as well and tells you all like the fucked up shit Steve Jobs did and all the shit he did with his kids and stuff. So it's not just like some fucking hagiography of making it all lovely and all the rest of it. So there's one. Let me think. What else?
I would recommend a book called River of Shadows, which is it's sort of a biography of Edward Muybridge, who invented what is effectively like a video, the first video camera. So the ability to capture moving images in photography. And it's not only very interesting about Muybridge, but it is really an extremely good discussion about how this technology and how other pieces of technology, including the development of the railroads, kind of collapsed the concepts of space and time and created the modern world is fucking amazing. It's really good.
I'll fire a few more off you. So I'll give you one is one that I've always suggested. I think I even gave it to Monty, that book, The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. That's essentially biographical. It's about a kid who's a chess prodigy who then switches and does Tai Chi push hands and eventually in real life has actually done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's all about how, like, it's like you said, the art of learning. How do you learn and how do you take those skills and apply them in different areas? There's one. What else? Let me think. Oh, I've got to go with like one of my favorite books ever is Cosmic Trigger episode 1 or whatever by Robert Anton Wilson. That's
a good one.
Autobiographical. It's a great one. Basically, it's a guy who's just plugged into the literal counterculture of the 60s, like friends with Timothy Leary and Burroughs, and it's amazing. He knows Ezra Pound, and like it's ridiculous, like the people he knew from that era. There's a good one for you. Let me think if I can do one more. I'll give you one sports one, because usually sports biogs are actually shit usually, but one that's actually not a bad one is actually Open by Andre Agassi, because he, first of all, he does tell you stuff, like, for example, in the 90s, it's not a joke, Monty, he was literally using meth and playing fucking tennis. And then also, this is mad, I didn't know this myself at the time, but do you know this, Monty? Do you know that Andre Agassi was bald the whole time?
Wait, really?
So you know when he won Wimbledon, he had that hair, that was a wig. That's real. See it, dude, it's amazing, isn't it? What? You know that whole thing, like images, everything, that was a wig. He'd already had the baldness at that point. That's insane, isn't it? But he got away with it somehow. He's getting away with that somehow. Because you'd think someone's going to see you in a fucking dressing room and go, isn't that a wig or something? It never got out somehow. So there's one. So in this book, he's mad raw about all the shit. Also, here's the maddest detail about that book. He essentially, it's his dad is one of those nutter dads who like forced him to play at like age 3, Monty. So Andre Agassi says in this book, I hate tennis. It's just he's really good at it. So it's a really fascinating book. Think about that. When's it ever like that with someone? There's an interesting one for you. Andre Agassi Open. There you go. There's a few.
You are creating a fictional esport for a book, comic, anime, movie, whatever. You must take all aspects of real life esports to do this, but you can only take one from each esports scene once. So the aspects are the game, the way tournaments are done. This is actually an interesting question.
Paste this one here again. So
I am. Here are the aspects. We can only pick, we have to pick a different game for each of these. The game, the way tournaments are done, player personalities, and the size of the scene. Interesting.
But here's the problem, Monty. I actually think this would be very different if it was all these factors. Because notice what he's done there, Monty, is it's not like if I pick the game, you can go, but that's not a big game because I'm picking the size of the game elsewhere.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. Everyone thinks, Monty, I'm going to say CSGO for the game, right? Of course not. The game would be Quake 1v1. If I can make everyone in the world also watch it. Dude, you know, famously, in the modern day, yes, CSGO is the most palatable. 1v1 Quake is the most palatable game ever. You don't even need to know what a rocket launcher is, what a grenade. It's obvious what these things do. When you fire out a grenade and it bounces and then blows up, you instantly know, right, what, 2 seconds later, a grenade explodes. You fire a rocket, it's obviously a rocket. You fire the lightning gun. It's one of the most intuitive games ever. And it has like a mixture of all the high octane action, but it has incredible layers of strategy like chess, like moving chess. So I think the game would have to be Quake 1v1 for me. And then in terms of what are the rest, what would you pick for the game? Do you have a different one? Are you going to go RTS or something?
Yeah, Brood War. I mean, I'm just an RTS fan, so if I could make everybody like an RTS again, I definitely would if I had that power.
Oh, that's another good hack I hadn't thought of. I could also force people to understand RTS, so I guess they would enjoy it more, right? Yeah, because I was thinking, what would they get into Brood War with it?
Right. So the thing about it is, like, I would pick Brood War, and then you just pick the size of the scene of League of Legends, and
by the way, League of Legends is definitely the one. For that one, League of Legends 100% winning the last one. That's not even debatable. I always tell people it's the main reason I'm in League of Legends, because it's just such a unique quality. The whole world plays it.
The way
tournaments are done. Ooh, maybe CSGO for that? What do you think?
CSGO for that, for sure.
One of the two.
CSGO, because Dota's tournament circuit is still, I think, way too heavily weighted to TI. I like the 2 major system, and I like the way that the tournaments are done around the world in CSGO, so I would pick CSGO.
By the way, I actually think this one, player personalities, you could go with loads of games, mate, because in my opinion, like Quake, StarCraft, CSGO, all have amazing personalities. Not least because these are games, if you notice, where, because they're not like League, where the meta just fucks you up the arse every 3 months, you can just be like one type of player forever in these games. It's awesome, isn't it? You can have like a totally set style of player personality. Like, so I think if you look at like the personalities of like Cooler and Rafa and Cypher and Quake, and then you think of if you don't know the names, it's like fucking Sesame Street of like the Hall of Fame. It's like Flash and J-Dong and Beast.
Well, in terms of personalities,
personalities ever.
I mean, I think Flash is kind of boring as a personality, but I think they mean like the actual character of the players. So if like you could on camera presence.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. I would pick, honestly, it's going to be interesting because I can't pick I can't pick
Oh, I
League.
forgot you can only do one each, right?
I can't
forgot.
pick
So
League,
it eliminates it, right.
CS:GO, or StarCraft right now. So I'm going to pick Rainbow Six for player personalities
Yeah.
because I think player personalities, the players in Rainbow Six right now are both very interesting. There's a huge, like, there's a lot of different kind of personalities. They're not afraid to talk shit. They're not afraid to have banter. They're really like putting themselves out there. In Rainbow Six, you also get player personalities from all over the world because anybody can
Oh,
win in
yes.
Rainbow Six right now.
Yes.
Like you can get a Korean team who wins, European, Brazilian, like North American. Honestly, Rainbow Six is some of the best player personalities scenes out there at the moment. So I have big Rainbow Six for player personalities.
Let me think. What would I pick for that one, though? Personalities. All right, I know what I'm going to pick for that one because I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pick Dota 2 because Dota 2 has a lot of very strong personalities. But here's why I'm cheating. Right now, it'd be terrible if you took the current Dota 2. You have to let me be talent on the event that we're working. Because if I'm talent on the event, I will absolutely cause so much trouble with those fucking massive ego cunts with the Dota 2 pros. You will get some of the best spicy interviews. Because here's the problem. That's a game, essentially, if people don't know, where because of the way you get hired for TI is being popular and being in with Valve. It's a game that disincentivizes harsh criticism of star players. You are just essentially making a rod for your own backs. If you make a whole angle, Monty, like, I think Artis is overrated, Reddit is going to hate you and you are just not going to get hired. You're going to be hated. So the problem is, I've always thought, it's why I've said in the past, some of the TOs for real have asked me, would I consider coming to Dota? Because they want someone to come in, like I do, and just come in and go, Fallen's overrated, Smith's is shit, you're not even good, cut this guy. Like, they need someone like that, basically, because that game could be amazing if you had that.
So there is a question about casting esports people in Lord of the Rings. I'm going to save that one till next time because we got to get through this, and that's going to take a while. So ask again next time. I do think that's a fun one to answer. I think this next one's quick. Thorin is a big fan of Dune. What do you think about the sequels? Are they worth reading? Yes, the sequels are worth reading. They're better than Dune.
I think the fourth book is the best book ever written. So yes, I think all 6 are good. By the way, all 5 sequels are good.
I've only read through 4. I also think the sequels are worth reading.
Since you haven't read the last 2, all I'll tell you is this: the last 2 totally changed the story of the characters, but you'll be amazed how they reinvent the concept. It's mega.
I think that the first book of Dune is just an appetizer. It's just like an amuse-bouche. It's a tease into the crazy, like, time and space philosophical awesomeness that is the rest of the books. Like, it really is just a very simple entry point. And if you like the first book of Dune, you should absolutely read other books.
Like, to me, I would describe it this way. Normally in shows, this is how The Matrix was ruined, how Star Wars was ruined. What ruins shows is this, Monty. When a writer who's not quite good enough locks onto a really interesting concept that's mysterious, because all they do is explain it and it becomes utter shit. So, like, it becomes like, the Force was a great idea. Midichlorians and all, that's fucking whack. It's garbage. So, you know what I mean? They take all these things and they make it work. Matrix, wow. And imagine what Zion must be like. Well, you saw what Zion was like. Fucking hell, I bet you wish it was a mystery again. You could do it in your own mind. Like, whereas here's the difference. In Dune, when they hint at stuff like powers and press, you think, oh, well, obviously they're going to have to keep that mysterious. No, they go really in depth, but they do something totally unique with it. Like, the depth, they actually managed to sort of maintain the story while still explaining some of these details. It's actually real. I think you sort of walks a very fine line.
Also, I think what it critically does is it doesn't, when the spice only gets cooler. Like, the Force only got lamer the more you explained it. Exactly. The spice only gets cooler the more they explain it.
They actually had a very cool concept of how they used it, didn't they? Yeah.
With the split played mostly online, will the lack of LAN experience as a team affect the performance of the LPL team at Worlds? Probably not. Maybe, but I don't think so.
It don't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much competition at LPL that I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. There's a scene in the movie Wonder Woman 1984 where she wishes for her dead boyfriend to come back. So he possesses a handsome guy to come back to life. Thoughts? I haven't seen that movie.
I thought there was someone coming. Thoughts? What the hell? Okay.
Thoughts?
All right. Okay.
I mean, I didn't watch the 1984 because I thought the first Wonder Woman was so terrible. And here's why, guys.
Yeah, it was pretty boring.
So it was boring, but for me, the narrative around the first Wonder Woman was like, oh, she's a powerful woman. Look at what a strong, independent female hero she is. She fucking sucks because first off, she is part of a female, like, warrior philosophy cult where she's educated in, like, ancient philosophy, supposed to be very smart, right? She's also an incredible warrior. what happens? Literally the first guy who washes up on her island, she's like, oh, I totally believe this guy's telling the truth. He's now my ally. It's like, you don't even know anything about this conflict that is this world-spanning war that is going on. And all you do is immediately believe everything that the first dude who washes up onto your island says to you.
They aren't going to realize the joke here. Think it through. What if that was a German guy who'd made it? And she'd just be going, oh, where is? Oh, I'm joining the regime. Like,
exactly. And this is supposed to be a person who is educated in ancient Greek philosophy, which is about conversation and questioning the nature of reality. So either she is a moron, or like. That's the only conclusion. She is just a moron, or like she doesn't even understand at a very basic level the philosophy which she was taught. So in a way, it strips her of all agency. And then they do this weird like fish out of water sequence, which is like fine because it's supposed to be funny and it is kind of like humorous to see her. But at the end, everything she does is to save. She has no ethical grounding. She's just doing things to save this dude that she fell in love with, which is the exact opposite of a strong, independent woman. So she's stupid and believes everything that she's told to by the first person she meets. And then secondly, she's not actually trying to save the world. She like, when she does, her entire inner power comes from the fact that she loves this guy, not from her own ethics, not from her own training, not from the culture she was raised in. So she's actually just an extremely weak and fickle woman who doesn't have a brain to think for herself. So that's why I didn't like Wonder Woman, was I thought it was the antithesis of everything it was supposed to be. Also, David Thewlis in an action fight is super weird. Like, why would you cast David Thewlis to do? I love David Thewlis.
And that makes no sense at all. Yeah. But you don't know that's someone whose entire strength's talking and acting, not fighting, obviously. Yeah.
But I mean, like the way I make a strong woman is people wash up on her island and she grills them and finds out the truth of her own, and maybe finds out there are some bad things to the people she's helping, but she does it because it's better than the alternative, right? Or it's the lesser of two evils. And then at the end, just because Chris Pine is devastatingly handsome, that's not the reason why she wins a fight. She wins a fight because she trained her whole fucking life to do that. And fuck Chris Pine, like he's there and like cool, she can be in love with him, but it's not giving her some insane inner strength that she didn't have otherwise.
Yeah, the problem is I obviously never watched the 1984 movie because there's zero reason to. And I did see the first one when I was on a plane, because it's one of those movies I've just resigned to, like, I will only use it to waste time on a plane. When I watched it, I also thought the same thing, like, this is just whatever, isn't it? And I know another flaw I thought with that movie is it reminded me of whenever Marvel do the first movie in a series. I'll tell you why the first movie is always actually fairly underwhelming, because the villain's always shit. It's never some super fucking villain, is it? Like this time, it was just that fucking Danny Houston guy just being a Nazi. Like, look, he's a good actor, but that's not a cool enough villain, is it? Like, it needs to be like the Red Skull or some sick fucking Doctor Doom type character. Like, you need to do one of those. So I also don't think they made the stakes high enough, mate, because I think they were just gambling that it was a one-off movie or some stupid shit, you know? Who cares about that franchise? It's a fucking snore fest, isn't it? Who cares?
Also, Wonder Woman is just lame. But I find people's celebration. It's like, just because a female character is the lead doesn't mean that that is a good representation of female empowerment, which is Wonder Woman in a nutshell. Like, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her to be like Wonder Woman, because that means she's just an idiot. I think she's a bad example. I think she's a terrible example. I think that she just does all of the same shit that society says they don't want, which is just like being a foil to a male character who's actually the power within the movie, but people just pretend that she's not for some reason. Now, favorite television or radio ad jingle. Now, I don't have a favorite one because they're all annoying, but I will say the progressive ones that they did with Peyton Manning were at least funny, where they used the progressive jingle with like Peyton Manning and the chicken parm or whatever. That was pretty funny.
So it has to be a jingle.
Yeah. I don't know. You have any ones from the UK that?
No, because the problem is I haven't watched TV in the UK for like 20 years. Monty.
That's also true.
I don't really know any of the modern jingles, do I?
Yeah. The problem with this question is that literally.
Right, here's mine. I'm going to go next level. I'm going to go because my favorite jingle was a fictional character inside the show Seinfeld, where there was that episode where there was a guy who was on cable TV as a mascot called the Wiz, and he has to wear a really silly hat and go, "I'm the Wiz, I'm the Wiz," and it's like you're just getting discounts on deals. And what happens in this episode? Spoilers. Basically, Elaine starts dating that guy, and what you're going to love the premise of this, Monty. And the reason she falls in love with him is she's mistaken that she's just just recognizing that he's obviously familiar, and she's thinking that there's some special connection between them. So then she starts dating the guy who played this mascot, right? But when he's not doing that gig anymore. And the best part is she's going to Jerry and telling him all stuff like, oh, the thing about him is there's sort of like a quiet dignity to him. You know, he wouldn't just sell out for money and stuff. And then obviously Jerry's already seen this commercial, and so he knows, but he's just sitting back like, oh, okay, oh, really? Oh, yeah. And he's just knowing that at any moment this penny's going to drop, it's going to mean it. So that's, there you go, the whiz from Seinfeld. I've cheated as usual.
I haven't seen that episode, actually.
It's a banger.
Seinfeld is great, though. If you had complete control over everything to do with world seeding format, etc., what changes would you make? Just double limb the playoffs. I would also get rid of the play-in tournament, like as part of worlds itself. I don't think it does anything that makes it more competitive. I would change the group stage into just GSL, be it best of 3 GSL brackets. Like I said, if you did double limb and, like, first off, best of 3 GSL brackets add almost no time to the schedule in group stage. It adds maybe a few more games, maybe, depending if some of them are more 3-game matches than other ones. So that's an easy thing that doesn't change really broadcast time or scheduling at all. And then you have time for double limb in the rest of the tournament, because you have 2 weeks where there are only 3 best of 5s being played of semis and finals. If you just stayed in one location and added a few more broadcast days, you could easily do double elimination. That's not even a question. So I think that's the main problem. But
the thing by default I would instantly do is, obviously I would take all BO1 out of the tournament. I just don't think it has any place, you know.
Yep.
Especially because I always think this as well. Here's the difference, Monty. In like CSGO, look, best of 1 isn't going to be as good a sample size, but it's going to be a similar type of game. The drafting part alone means BO1's totally inappropriate, and the side, but imbalance, and how do you determine it? That alone, in my opinion, like invalidates BO1, you
know. Okay. Marry, fuck, kill in a video game. Super Team Edition. TL, Fnatic, Gen.G. Definitely marry Gen.G.
Marry Gen.G instantly, yeah.
Instantly.
Wait a minute, so it's Vitality TL. I'd probably fuck Vitality.
No, TL, Fnatic, Gen.G. TL, Fnatic, Gen.G.
I'm going to fuck Fnatic then, because Fnatic in theory could still be half decent, whereas I'm going to kill Team Liquid. Undisputedly going to kill Team Liquid.
Just in terms of the players, like Fnatic at least might be a little freaky in bed and like interesting. Like you could see Fnatic getting wild in the sack. Like Team Liquid, there is nobody on that team is going to be wild in the sack.
Oh, Björkson, even though you're paying him like high dollar escort value, he's just giving you plain missionary sex. After 2 minutes, he goes, "Oh well, better next time." Kiss on the cheek, goes to sleep. Like, I paid $5,000 for this. The fuck?
I guess Whippo might pull out some interesting toys, but I think Fnatic would be more fun.
The problem with Whippo is, though, you never know, do you? Like, you might actually think you want to settle down nice night, and then you just shove some up. What the fuck? See, that's the problem. You might be too wild. It's too much uncertainty.
You never know what's coming.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that was the last question. It's also a good question to end on. We will see you guys next week. It will be back on its normal time, Mondays. We just had to do this for weird scheduling reasons. Hopefully, I won't have COVID any longer next week. I feel a lot better now. That's also part of the reason why it was a little weird this last week. I was away and then had COVID. So good times. We should be back on schedule for everything, though, by the time the Super Week ends and before the first version of the playoffs. We'll see you then.